A few years ago, plastic bag waste in our city came to a tipping point. It was clear. We had a bag problem. My department was tasked to reduce plastic bag consumption. We needed to come up with ways to change human behavior. So we asked ourselves,
would you like a bag?
What do people really hate?
Yep.
Getting punched in the stomach. Preliminary studies showed that the consequences weren't severe enough to warrant behavioral change.
Actually, can I get that double bagged?
So we thought, what do people hate more than getting punched in the stomach? Kissing Helga.
Hey, big boy.
People didn't find her so offensive after all, so we had to get creative.
How many bags? Okay, now, pour this ice water down your pants.
We tried everything.
Eat this rat.
Defuse this bomb.
Even fighting your clone. After blowing through millions of dollars of government funds on research, I came up with a brilliant idea.
Why don't we just charge 5 cents per bag?
That's a stupid idea.
Would you like a bag?
Yes.
5 cents a bag.
5 cents? 5 cents? Do I still have the option of getting punched?
Honestly, I don't know how everyone else missed it.
Why don't you just get a reusable bag?
I have run these canyons for 6 million years. I have traveled from the Rocky Mountains to the deserts, through scorching heat and freezing cold, from the land of the dinosaurs to fields of food.
I lend my hand to 7 states, 2 countries, 9 national parks,
and 36 million people across an arid West.
I am not the strongest or the largest, but I am the hardest working.
People love me.
My playfulness,
My beauty.
my power.
My life. But I don't think I can offer any more.
I am tired.
I am tired,
tapped,
and tied. Of the hundreds of major rivers in the world, I am one of the few who no longer kisses the sea.
Battles to harness my soul have been won and lost. Use me wisely, and I will sustain you.
Use me like you have, and I will break. My name is Red. The Grand River Red. The American Nile.
The Canyon Maker. I am the Colorado River.
And I am the most endangered river in America.
Just this month, my bill was like $138.
Even at one phone call a week cost me $40 to $50 every month.
I am living on a fixed income of SSI, so this is really a great hardship. Families are being punished. When they incarcerate their children, they incarcerate the whole family.
In 2011, the Media Action Grassroots Network, Working Narratives, and Prison Legal News founded the Campaign for Prison Phone Justice, an effort to call on the FCC to address the cost of interstate phone calls. The campaign mobilized prisoners to send hundreds of letters. Advocates and families filled out postcards, met with elected officials, and signed petitions. Partnerships were formed across the political spectrum and with groups in the criminal justice, civil rights, and public interest community. The film distribution company Participant Media and director Ava DuVernay joined the fight through a social action campaign tied to the release of the feature film Middle of Nowhere. In an effort to push the FCC to act, the campaign hosted a historic rally outside of the Federal Communications Commission where for the first time, families of prisoners, elected officials, civil rights and faith leaders came together to call for an end to predatory phone rates.
We're all held captive when predatory phone companies gouge our families.
My son has been incarcerated now for over 10 years, and my husband estimates that in the time we spent over $25,000 on prison phone calls.
My hero's not yours, you probably arrested them. Your schools probably neglected them. They spawn thoughts, you probably infected them. Feed us what you feed us, you can lay us next to them. FBI call it major crimes. Babies making babies cry.
You know, sometimes when I'm walking down the street, I'm not necessarily looking out and seeing all these water-wasting lawns and people that aren't as connected to their neighbors and their lives as they could be. I'm walking down the street looking, going, edible oases, rainwater-fed landscape, and just looking at the possibility of these sort of landscapes up and down the streets of neighborhoods and communities all across this world. Small actions do ripple and they add up and they have a cumulative impact. And so when you're building upon your small mindful actions, you know, you have the confidence and the ability to take on something a little bit greater. So that could be nice. This in the context of where we're at as a planet with climate change and these really big issues and people that are more disconnected and less skilled than ever, it becomes even more amazing and powerful how much of a solution this is to design these ecological gardens and to come together with shared vision and shared voice. There's never been a time where your choices have mattered more. Doing something as simple as us transforming a landscape creates a model that anybody could look at far and wide, and you're sharing food and connecting and building skills together in your own neighborhood. It's a richer way to live in normal times, but in the new normal of climate change and erratic weather and economic upheaval, it becomes essential. Whether it's me, you, Gandhi, Che, MLK, Willy Wonka, whoever, past, present, or future, the power of our daily actions is all that we have. You know, and like Archimedes said, give me a place to stand and a lever long enough and I'll move the world. And that's what those simple actions do. They move the world every day.
You wouldn't let money just blow out of your house. So when your AC or heater is on, make sure the doors, windows, and fireplace flue are shut tight. If you're headed out, turn down the AC or lower the heat by 10 degrees. And always keep your water heater set at 120. A little bit of common sense goes a long way. Get more great tips at energysaver.gov.
So, I'm kind of new here, but I've noticed a trend. My human does this funny thing where she goes around and gets all my toys, and then she hides them in that basket by the door. You know, but it's always the same basket, and it's always in the same place. And then she acts so surprised when I find them, but, you know, she's putting them in the same basket. Again. It's like, hello, that's where you put it last time. You were the worst at hide and go seek.
Is the Bill Press Show.
Good morning and welcome to the Bill Press Show. I'm Sabrina Siddiqui, a politics reporter at the Huffington Post, and I'm filling in for Bill this morning. We have a great show ahead of us, and as usual, I will have a little bit of help from our friends. We've got Elise Murphy running the board.
Good morning.
Good morning. Alicia Cruz is taking our calls. We have Cyprian Bolding, our videographer, who helps make us look good over here, and Peter Ogburn, executive producer, making trouble in the studio.
Hi, Sabrina.
Hi.
Welcome back.
Thank
to the
you.
Host chair.
I have been allowed to come back.
You've been asked now a couple of times.
A couple of times. This is the third one.
Wow.
Third time's the charm.
Yeah. This is great.
This is a three-peat.
Yeah.
I've achieved what LeBron James never could and never will.
Oh. Oof.
Oof. Too much? Too soon?
No, I support it. I support it.
Well, we have a really great show ahead of us today. We'll be talking about Iraq. We'll be talking about the developing situation in Ferguson, Missouri. We will also be talking about immigration reform later on in the day. But first...
This is the Full Court Press.
Yes, indeed. Just a couple of other stories making news. Speaking of NBA, yesterday they made it official. They announced that the LA Clippers have been bought by former Microsoft CEO Steve Ballmer. It was a $2 billion purchase. Remember, this was all stemming from the lawsuit of whether or not Donald Sterling could keep the team. They found that he could not, in fact, keep the team, so it is now official. Again, LA Clippers owned by Steve Ballmer.
Now, what do we know about this guy?
He's a kook. He's a total nut. And,
is he racist, though?
No, he's not going to say a bunch of racist junk about the players on the team. I think we could say that. There are rumors about where, like, what he's going to do with the team, yes, right? Like whether or not he's going to move it or anything like that. But for now, they're in L.A. They're owned by Steve Ballmer and not by a foaming racist. So
amen to that.
That's good. That's progress. That's absolutely progress. Sabrina, you are on Twitter. You use the
I am
Twitter.
on the Twitter.
You use the Twitters. Well, there's a new report out that shows just how many people use Twitter and how many aren't actually human. In a new filing, Twitter had to say that up to approximately 8.5% of the accounts that it considers active are bots.
I'm not at all surprised by
Twitter
that.
bots. So when you do the math, how many Twitter bots are out there that are actually active, mind you? These aren't people who have created an account and then just let it sit. These are active Twitter bots. 23 million of them are out there.
Wow.
Isn't that crazy?
I feel like half of them are fans of Justin Bieber.
Yeah, exactly. Half of those
the
are Bieber
majority of
accounts
the
alone.
spam I get is Team Justin Bieber,
Yes.
follow back.
Yes.
Basically.
Yeah, no, I get the. I mean, I don't get the same ones that you do.
I'm sure you do.
Good.
It's
You're
okay.
bigger on
It's okay to
Twitter than
admit that you occasionally tweet about Justin Bieber and then a million bots reply
It's
to you.
happened. It's happened. And selfies. Selfies strike again. A Polish couple went on vacation in Portugal. They went to Cabo da Roca. They went to the edge of a cliff to take a selfie to get the beautiful scenery around them. And they fell off the edge.
No way.
Yes.
That is one of the worst ways to go. Because I heard about this and they had young children.
They did have young children.
Two young
and the kids
kids.
witnessed it. And there are a lot of kids. There are a lot of other people who witnessed it because it's sort of a tourist
Can
attraction.
you imagine these kids growing up, though? You know, we lost our parents at a young age. Oh, what happened? Oh, they were taking
Death
a
by
selfie.
selfie.
Death by selfie. They fell off a
Here's-
cliff while taking a selfie.
Here's the deal, though. There was a safety barrier in place that they had to climb over to get that selfie. So
they were stupid.
there were precautions to try and prevent stupid people
like them
falling to their deaths. And I'm not saying that I'm happy that they
Right.
passed.
I mean, it's
but
a sad
they
thing.
had it coming.
It's sad, but it's so stupid.
Don't cross.
Do not take selfies on cliffs, period. But if you do not cross the safety
That's right.
barrier.
Exactly.
That's right. I'm with you on that.
We've reached peak selfie.
That is a peak selfie.
That is peak selfie.
Total peak selfie.
Well, I want to kind of kick off the show today by talking about the situation in Ferguson. As we know, on Saturday, Michael Brown, a teenager who is just 18 years old, was on his way to his grandmother's house with a friend of his. They were walking in the street when confronted by a police officer. Now, there are varying accounts of what exactly transpired, but according to eyewitnesses, in particular, Brown's friend, the officer very rudely, using expletives, told him to get off the street and get on the sidewalk. And when they did not, he continued to pursue them. Some kind of altercation then ensued, and he shoots Michael Brown dead. He shoots him several times in broad daylight. Something that has caused uproar, not just in Ferguson, but nationwide. But in Ferguson, it's led to protests. Police are handling them with tear gas. There have been riots, some looting too. I mean, this story just, I think, has reopened the memories of Trayvon Martin for many people. But, you know, Peter, where I think that this is even worse is because this is law enforcement.
Yeah.
I mean, these are the people who are trained to know how to deal with a perceived threat. And here it doesn't even appear that there was one.
You know, look, I grew up in the South, and I know that a lot of people who haven't spent a lot of time in the South have a hard time wrapping their minds around some of the racism that still exists. And I'm obviously a very white man, so my experience hasn't been one that someone like Michael Brown or a lot of young black men have had. But I mentioned this before, and I'll mention it again because I have seen something like this in action. A friend of ours on the show, Jamal Simmons, Democratic strategist, once said, when we were talking about Trayvon Martin, he said, every black youth has that moment in their life where somebody confronts them and makes them feel unwelcome and says, you know, hey, you really shouldn't be here, or what are you doing in this part of town, or something to make them feel like, oh, okay, I'm not supposed to be here. And you never think that that's going to come from a police officer. And so this Michael Brown, 6'4", noticeable, large guy, it doesn't seem like he was starting any trouble.
No.
But he would certainly get, he's the kind of guy that you could not ignore, right? Like, he's a big guy. And so the fact that he's just there and being noticeable, and for that reason, a police officer has to sort of pull that authority card on him, then
Right.
it just escalates from there.
And it escalates from there, and this is precisely what leads to mistrust of law enforcement within the black community, because they grow up feeling like they aren't allowed to be certain places for no apparent reason other than the color of their skin. And law enforcement certainly has shown multitudes of racial bias. We know about L.A. and its history. The NYPD has been under scrutiny. Just a few weeks ago, there was the case of the police officer in New York who placed a black male in a chokehold, and he later died. And again, the police seem to have been confrontational. He was not initially confrontational until it escalated because they were questioning him for no apparent reason. We want to get you guys in too if you want to engage with us on this. 866-55-PRESS. That's 866-557-7377. So definitely reach out to us that way or tweet us at BP Show. So if you have any thoughts on what's happening in Ferguson, you looked like you were going to say something.
Yeah, well, one of the things I was going to say about the case in New York City with the chokehold, because we saw that whole video leading up to the man that was that was killed. You know, it was a peaceful situation. He kept telling the police, you know, it ends today, and trying to explain the situation. I didn't do anything wrong,
right?
And the cops were just sort of standing around him and kept prodding him,
right?
And I was thinking to myself, why? What are they doing? Why won't they just walk away from the situation, which has clearly settled itself, right? I mean, it's not like there was an ongoing situation that they had to get involved in. And so I picture that scenario with the Michael Brown thing of him saying, maybe he shot, back something to the police officer about being in the street. Maybe he said something.
And
maybe he said something.
You know what? He has every right to say the police could have just ignored it.
Sure.
And he had walked away. He and his friend had actually walked away, according to his friend. They said that they were just a little distance away from Brown's grandmother's house. So they were almost at their destination. Don't worry about it. Seemed to be the effect of what they said. And it's just amazing because parents, for most people, don't have to worry about their kids just walking on the street. But when you look at certain communities, namely the black community, but also the Hispanic community, this has come up too, they have to actually worry about just their kid being able to walk home from school or to go to a convenience store. Let's hear what Michael Brown's mother had to say, because he was actually getting ready to go to college, and she gave her first interview along with his dad to CNN's Don Lemon. Let's take a listen.
He was my firstborn. Sweet, loving, dedicated. He worked hard to get through high school, and we were so proud of him. And for him to start a new journey going to college, we was even more proud of him. And he was just spending the summer at his grandmother's house. Never did we think we'd be planning a funeral. We was waiting on his first day of school.
I mean, never did we think we would be planning a funeral. He's on his summer break. And she has actually talked about part of the issue with some members, especially in lower income areas, and how difficult it is for young black men to encourage them to stay in school, the graduation rate being lower in some parts of the country. And she talked about that too in the interview, and how they were so proud of him because he took a lot of work to get him to stick through high school, and he was going to college, and needlessly his life is cut short. It's a terrible thing. And I think that what's even more concerning is that the local police investigation, at least, seems to already be siding with the police officer. We've heard the county chief or sheriff say, well, he feels terrible, but it seems like it was an honest mistake.
I think that when you're a police officer, you should be held to a higher standard. Mm-hmm. And if you put yourself in a position, or you find yourself in a position where you have shot an unarmed person, mm-hmm. you should have to go through hell to justify why you shot an unarmed person. I don't care I don't care how hard it is on you or how hard it is on your family. I think that you have to show some sort of undeniable proof that you felt so threatened that you had to pull a gun on someone who was unarmed.
And they didn't even provide that explanation. That's what's even more bizarre.
That's what's crazy.
All they've said is there was a struggle, and it seemed like Brown was reaching for the officer's gun. He's standing outside the vehicle.
Right.
The officer approaches him.
Yeah.
There are some words exchanged. He's implying, against what several eyewitnesses saw, which is not what they saw, that Michael Brown actually reached into the vehicle somehow to make a move for the officer's gun, which just doesn't seem to be within the realm of possibility based on where they were standing, based on the distance that he was shot at. I mean, he was shot about 35 feet away from the car.
Right. You're a police officer. You've been trained in hand-to-hand combat. You've been trained in taking down the bad guy, right? Like, you know how to, presumably, you know how to handle yourself in a high-intensity situation without pulling your gun. Right. You know, you've heard this as many times as I have. Any good police officer says the last thing you want to do is pull your gun. And so it appears as though this might be a situation where this police officer went to the gun way earlier than he should have and couldn't contain the situation in a way that he should have and knows how to do.
And appeared to not want to contain the situation.
No.
Just the manner in which he aggressively pursued them implies that there's a lot more to this story simply because they were walking down the street. If you're an officer, he could have even politely approached them, and maybe this would have been avoided altogether. And we can actually talk about police training a little bit after the break because it's something I looked into. We'll take a quick break here, but we do want to hear from you on this issue. Don't forget to call 866-55-PRESS to chime in on Ferguson, and we will be back soon.
This is the Bill Press Show.
Tune into Free Speech TV for Democracy Now!, a national, independent, award-winning news program bringing you people and perspectives rarely seen on corporate media.
Grunt work. Love it, hate it, useful, not useful.
Necessary.
Our social entrepreneurs are people who have been on the front lines of social change. I've learned so much from talking with them. This is Cafe Impact, and I'm Jonathan Lewis.
I will say that I think is a challenge for anyone, especially the new workforce as they come in, is the ability to accept grunt work with grace.
The most boring, awful details are the most important elements of doing this work. From the way you save names in your Rolodex to the way you bank and you deposit checks. The truth is, this work isn't glamorous, it's rewarding. You don't go into this for the glamour, you go into it for the impact. And so it takes that determination to do the scut work to actually get anywhere.
It can be really challenging in a first job for someone who's coming out of finishing school to have the enthusiasm that they do to make the type of social impact that they've dreamed of. And now they're here in this first job and all of a sudden they're shouldered with all this grunt work. And they don't understand and they don't get it and they're resentful.
Talk more about the power of answering phones.
Sure, I did that myself, took out the trash, cleaned offices when I had to, and it's all good. There's power in being a good team player and in being somebody who sometimes has to support other people's leadership before you get to have your own moment in the sun.
Is it hard to wait?
It is absolutely hard to wait, especially if you're an alpha female like I am.
I think grunt work can help a new employee build trust internally and teach them the nuances of how an organization is run so that they can have a real good sense of what HR is doing, what finance is doing, what all the other departments are, and that actually makes them a better employee in the long run.
So in my role on a daily basis, I literally can be looking at a new venture in software. We could be looking at a microfinance deal. I could be making coffee, taking out the trash, and riding a tractor on any given day.
Have you found people who thought it was demeaning that they were given this job, work in the front office and make the coffee when they graduated with all A's from this great university?
And, people like that just don't last very long in our world. If your approach to life is that, you're so smart and you're such a fabulous entrepreneur that you can't understand why people aren't giving you opportunities, it's really hard to advance.
Tune in to Gay USA with hosts Ann Northrup and Andy Hum for in-depth coverage of lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender news. Watch Gay USA every week, only on Free Speech TV.
What the frack?
What the frack?
What the frack?
President Obama, are you fracking kidding me?
Reopen the EPA studies.
In Texas, Wyoming, and Pennsylvania.
Fracking pollutes our oceans.
Fracking poisons our water.
Fracking makes climate change worse.
Fracking relies on toxic chemicals that cause cancer.
Ban fracking now.
Ban fracking now.
Go on. Ban it.
Ban fracking now. Please.
Seen on Free Speech TV and online on TawkrTV. This is The Bill Press Show.
Welcome back to the Bill Press Show. I'm Sabrina Siddiqui with the Huffington Post, filling in for Bill this morning. We've been talking Ferguson and the shooting death of Michael Brown, an unarmed teenager, at the hands of police on Saturday. Peter, what you got on social media?
Remember, we're on Twitter, by the way, at BP Show. We're tweeting all throughout the program at BP Show, where Mama for Obama says police officers have an obligation to de-escalate situations. This police officer that shot Mike Brown didn't do that. He murdered him. Also, Jessica weighing in says, you would think that in a time when all eyes are on law enforcement, they would use more prudence. Which is a good point, because I did see that some of the police officers are now going to be wearing body cameras so that there will be a little bit of oversight as to what's going on. Because some of the pictures coming out of Ferguson are terrifying, with the cops with their guns out pointed at citizens.
Right, and they're also restricting a lot of access to reporters.
Right.
We've got some people on the phone as well. Let's hear from Mike, who is in Shepherdstown, West Virginia. Good morning, Mike.
Yeah, I just wanted to point out, I think this is a systemic problem. You know, this is an us versus them mentality when it should be all of us together. There's no community policing going on. This is really paramilitary stuff, and it's frightening.
That's a great point. And it seems as though the Ferguson has been very militarized, but even leading up to this incident and the response, there have been a lot of reports on the severe racial bias just at the hands of Ferguson police and the way that they stop, the proportion with which they stop black men versus white males.
Look, I think that's a good point that he brought up. I think that we're now seeing riots and looting in Ferguson because people are fed up. And I don't think that that's the best outlet, but I do think that you should demand action from your elected officials in Ferguson, that you should demand action from your police force. You should demand that this police officer, whether or not he gets fired or whether or not you find out and he gives a damn good explanation of what happens and then you have some proof to back it up, you demand that from your public officials and from your police department.
You do. We have another caller online. We have Rodney in Oil City, Pennsylvania. Good morning, Rodney.
Good morning. I just wanted to say that not all cops are bad. There's some cops out there that are unhappy who shoot people first and ask questions later. We had a 68-year-old mentally ill, blind, and one-eyed lady get shot by an Old City policeman. He killed her. He murdered her. He never got charged. He walked away. That's going on too much, just like what you guys are talking about. There's too many cops. Instead of doing their job and doing what they're trained to do, they're pulling their guns and they're shooting people. That's got to stop.
Yeah.
It really does. I think Rodney brings up an interesting point, because a lot of this also has to do with accountability. Yeah. And part of the reason why the systemic problem continues is because most officers, even if they face charges, which many of them don't, they are never actually penalized for these actions. They often are put on paid leave.
Paid leave.
Paid leave or unpaid leave, but then brought back into the force.
Right.
And that's something I want to talk about more, because I actually have a piece going up today at the Huffington Post on this specific issue and possible reforms to how police and law enforcement are trained at the federal level. But keep talking to us at 866-55-PRESS, 866-557-7377. We're going to take a break. We will be back soon.
This is the Bill Press Show.
So this is my computer.
This is your computer. Let's go on the internet.
Let's go. Click it.
Yes.
Okay.
I cursor in between the R and the E. Pressing dot, I want you to just push the period.
she's gonna love me all over again.
That's it. Jamaica, here you go.
Here we go.
Good job.
Thank you. Thank you. And I did it by myself. Feel smarter.
So, I'm kind of new here, but I've noticed a trend. My human does this funny thing where she goes around and gets all my toys, and then she hides them in that basket by the door. You know, but it's always the same basket, and it's always in the same place. And then she acts so surprised when I find them, but, you know, she's putting them in the same basket. Again. It's like, hello? That's where you put it last time. You were the worst at hide and go seek.
So, same time next week?
Well, of course. Put away a few bucks, feel like $1 million. For free tips to help you save, go to Feed the Pig.
All right. I know this isn't any fun to talk about, but we should. Okay. So who's going to do what?
I'll pack the dead batteries.
Great.
I'll only put what I don't need into a duffel bag.
Perfect. That's totally unhelpful.
No problem.
Meanwhile, I will try to comfort everyone by speaking in a calm voice.
And I'll try to get the generator going without any gas.
Oh, let's not forget the cell phones, which probably won't work.
Right.
And who is going to handle supplies?
I can forget to do a list for us.
Thanks, pal.
Well, I think we couldn't be any less prepared. I'm proud of you guys.
Talk to your kids about who to call, where to meet, what to pack. Visit ready.gov/kids for tips and information.
Hey, thanks for stopping by. You know, I followed your character since the first episode. I'm a big fan. Big fan.
Thank you.
And listen, your storyline, it makes for incredible TV drama. Thing is, your drug use is very adult content. Too adult for the kids. So I'm gonna have to block you.
Oh, man.
Yeah. Well, have a good one.
You're a nice lady.
Connect with The Bill Press Show on Twitter. Follow us at BP Show and tweet using the hashtag WatchingBP. This is The Bill Press Show.
Welcome back to The Bill Press Show. I'm Sabrina Siddiqui, politics reporter with the Huffington Post, and I am filling in for Bill this morning. We've been talking about Ferguson, Missouri, and the tragic police slaying of Michael Brown, an unarmed black teenager who was just walking back to his grandmother's house when he and his friend were confronted by a police officer who shot him several times in broad daylight, apparently for no reason. Peter, you've been monitoring some feedback on social media. What are folks saying?
Yeah, remember, again, we're on Twitter at BP Show, where KG says, who or what is driving the militarization of our, quote, peace officers? It's a very good question of why that is what it is. Also, thank you very much to Gene Starwind, who commented, Peter, you're so white you probably glow in the dark. Now, look. No.
Do you?
It's true.
Oh.
It's true. It's very true.
We've got some callers
Hey,
on the line.
tan happening,
okay.
all right? I'm not-
This might be the perfect opportunity to bring up our next caller.
Let's do
Andrew from Moultrie, Georgia. Andrew, good morning. How are you?
Fine, how you doing?
Doing well. What do you got for us?
I just think that our police officers, some of them are just licensed vigilantes, and they taking it out on young youth, black youth, and I just feel like it's time for someone to step up and say enough is enough.
Absolutely. I think enough is something also this community feels particularly frustrated about, because that conversation comes up all too often, and yet it never seems to be enough.
The thing here's the real question, right? Here's the real question that I would love to get an answer to is, what do you do? Right. How do you respond? If you are a member of a community where this happens, what do you do? I know that to say enough is enough sounds good, and yes, we should all say this is too much. But what do you do?
It's complicated too because it's law enforcement.
Right.
It's not a corporate sort of scenario where, for example, if there were to be some kind of racist comments that come out of a company, people could boycott that company.
Right.
There are things that you could do. You could organize a sit-in somewhere, but it's complicated when it's law enforcement, because the best they can do is take to the streets, which they have, and try to peacefully protest, but eventually they have to go home, and there's usually little accountability on the side of law enforcement.
And by the way, if you are an African American living in Ferguson or nearby Ferguson, and you get into some trouble, you're going to call the police. Now, how confident are you that you're going to get the help that you need if you are in that situation, right? Like, I look, whenever you get in trouble, you call the police, right? Like, I'm not one of these people that thinks that, we should be pointing a ton of fingers at police in every single situation. However, in this particular thing where this police officer should have de-escalated, should have cooled the situation down, it seems as though he may have been on a power trip.
He escalated instead of de-escalating
the situation. Yeah.
We also have Al from Rome, Wisconsin on the line. Al, how are you?
Doing good. Okay. I see the whole thing as coming down to no organization should investigate itself. It seems to apply across the board. I mean, it's asinine if you really think about it.
It is. That's one of the issues that is what I think that the government is at least trying to look into. Now, whether it's going to get anywhere is another issue, but the Justice Department has said it's going to conduct a thorough review of law enforcement training. And this is something they announced yesterday in the wake of both what happened in Missouri as well as the chokehold death of an unarmed black man in New York at the hands of the NYPD.
Eric Garner, yeah.
Eric Garner. So whether they will actually put forward new standards, that remains unclear. I'm sure this will take time. But one of the other problems is that often there are standards in place. Police just don't follow them. If you look at the chokehold scenario, for example, with Eric Garner, chokeholds are actually technically banned under New York law. Again, it has to be some kind of threat of deadly force, which there was not in the case of Eric Garner.
Right.
But getting law enforcement to actually follow those standards, and again, most of them are good, but getting a significant amount of them to follow standards, especially when it comes to minorities, seems to be a problem that there is yet to be a resolution to.
I do, and I mentioned this before, and I'll come back to it, in the Eric Garner video where you had, 5 or 6 police officers standing around, almost sort of goading, provoke might be a bit strong, but letting this man not just say what he had to say, but continue to push him.
Getting him
worked up. And escalating a situation that did not need to be escalated. Those police should have walked away or monitored it from a little more of a distance, but certainly not continue to rile this man up until it becomes a scenario where it became physical.
It did become physical. It's almost like they invite the threat upon themselves to get the end goal
That's a bad cop.
That's a bad cop. I also want to get Rick, because Rick, he's on the line from St. Louis, Missouri. Good morning, Rick. Can you tell us a little bit about what it's like in St. Louis right now?
Well, I want to say I worked in Ferguson for 2 years at the apartment complex right next to Campfield Green, which where a young kid was killed at. I'm there every day. Cops would harass the people who live in the neighborhood, who live in the apartment complexes, constantly pull people over for no reason at all. You know, and they treated the people over there like they lived in a police state. You know what I mean? So I understand the mindset of the people. They're tired of it, you know, and nobody deserves to be treated like they're a constant a suspect, walking through your own neighborhoods, go visit your friends or whatever, coming and going. That's not right, you know. And a lot of people don't want to talk about the real issue which are here in this, which is race. But these cops have no respect for black life, you know. And if you have any black male friends, ask them, and they will tell you the truth about the situation. Every black man has had a story growing up as being a kid or as a young male where they've just been harassed by the cops like it's a game. You know, these cops do this for their own amusement, it seems to me. I remember I was 10 years old. I got stopped, myself and some friends, going to buy comic books. We're 10, 11 years old, and the cops threw us up against the wall, saying something about there was a break-in, and we fit the description at 10 years old.
Yeah, you know how dangerous those 10-year-olds can be.
That's absolutely outrageous. And actually, I do want to quickly bring up, before we take a break, given Rick's account, blacks in Ferguson, according to a review, an annual report that was conducted by the Missouri Attorney General last year, are twice as likely to be stopped by police as whites. Another statistic that came out was that last year, 93% of the arrests following car stops in Ferguson were of black people. 92% of searches and 80% of car stops involve blacks.
By the way, that's insane.
Those are staggering.
That's crazy.
3%.
There's something wrong there. And by the way, just to show a little bit of perhaps my own racial ignorance when I talked about how, you know, we call the cops when there's a problem. Sheila found us on Twitter, where we're tweeting at BP Show. Sheila says, unfortunately, in this area, most African-American men do not call the police when there is trouble because they are immediately treated as suspects, which is a reality, I guess, that they live with, and that sucks.
It's a reality, and if you're immediately treated as a suspect, you're less likely to want to comply because you just don't trust the intention of the officer. Real quick, I just want to get Jesse from Miami. Good morning, Jesse.
Good morning. Hey, this problem is old. I would like to follow up what the other guy said. The problem is systemic. If the problem is systemic, that would mean if there was no black people, white people, they would be rioting. So it would tell you that we need a redirection, not redistribution, a redirection of the wealth. So what do you think to solve that systemic problem?
It's a good question. I mean,
I think that, I think it is certainly there doesn't appear to be an easy way to resolve this systemic problem. To me, the first step comes simply police accountability. I think they've been getting away with it for far too long. Sadly, as we mentioned, enough is often the phrase that comes up in cases like these, and yet there's no recourse. There's no follow-up when it comes to holding people accountable. We'll take another quick break. We'll be back shortly. Keep tuning in to The Bill Press Show.
This is the Bill Press Show.
What the frack? What the frack?
What the frack?
What the frack?
President Obama, are you fracking kidding me?
Reopen the EPA studies.
In Texas, Wyoming, and Pennsylvania.
Fracking pollutes our oceans.
Fracking poisons our water.
Fracking makes climate change worse.
Fracking relies on toxic chemicals that cause cancer.
Ban fracking now.
Ban fracking now.
Go on. Ban it.
Ban fracking now.
Please.
Now hear this. Now hear this.
I want to talk to you about a critical issue of our day.
Net neutrality.
If you spend time on the internet for work or school or fun, listen up.
In case you don't know what's going on. We're halfway to the apocalypse right now.
The bill effectively ends what's known as net neutrality, which is the concept that everyone, everywhere should have free, universal, and non-discriminatory access to the internet.
No matter what your political agenda,
net neutrality
protects your freedom of speech.
The multi-billion-dollar corporations like AT&T,
Level 3
Verizon,
Cogent,
Comcast, and others want to be able to decide which websites open quickly, which don't, what information passes through, and which does not.
You know what that means?
They want to come in and
discriminate against
musicians, small business,
entrepreneurs,
special interest groups,
competition, consumer choice,
political and environmental activist groups,
bloggers,
democracy, church groups,
and average Joes.
They seek to impose and expand an empire of oppression.
They want to
undermine the democratic potential of the internet. That isn't fair. We cannot allow this to happen. The world has turned against this.
We've even got the Christian Coalition and the NRA involved in this because...
Let me just make this point once again.
Everybody understands that if you have anything that's remotely not mainstream, that this can be blocked if these measures go through. Call Congress. Tell them.
2 questions.
1.
Do you support freedom for your constituents?
2.
Do you support discrimination and favoritism for multi-billion-dollar corporations?
Call in all radio talk shows. Tell them.
I don't want big corporations to decide what I can or cannot view on my computer.
All right. This is a major issue. They're doing it right now.
Two anti-government, self-described revolutionaries have shot up a pizza restaurant as well as a Walmart in Las Vegas.
The internationally syndicated political series, The David Pakman Show, provides progressive talk, analysis, and interviews with the nation's youngest radio and television host, David Pakman. Find out more and catch up on all the latest episodes by visiting our website at freespeech.org.
On your radio, on TV, and online. This is The Bill Press Show.
Welcome back to The Bill Press Show. I'm Sabrina Siddiqui with the Huffington Post, filling in for Bill this morning. And we are joined now by David Jackson, White House correspondent for USA Today. Good morning, David. How are you?
Hi, good morning, Sabrina.
It's nice to hear from you. And we kind of wanted to kick it off by talking about this kerfuffle, if you will, between Hillary Clinton, who appears to have criticized President Obama's foreign policy in an interview this weekend with Jeffrey Goldberg from The Atlantic. Can you kind of break down what exactly happened here?
Well, sure. Those of us who came in Sunday morning to look at the Sunday shows happened to notice the Atlantic promoting this article, interview with Hillary Clinton by Jeffrey Goldberg. And it's not just any interview. I mean, the Atlantic, very prestigious publication. Jeffrey Goldberg is one of our best foreign policy analysts, and he talked in depth with Hillary Clinton. And she appeared, of course, some people say appeared, some people said she did, criticize President Obama for basically not being aggressive enough when it comes to Syria, Ukraine, the Middle East, the entire panoply of foreign policy issues. She was particularly critical of the administration's decision not to arm the Syrian rebels way back when the rebellion against Bashar al-Assad first started, and she basically said that that's one of the things that gave rise to this militant army that's now spreading across Syria and Iraq. She was very critical of that, and she also took a poke at the president's self-proclaimed foreign policy that he doesn't want to quote do stupid stuff. She said that's just a political slogan, not a foreign policy. So basically, you have the former Secretary of State criticizing the president she served for one term, while she herself is thinking about running for president, and it touched off quite a little firestorm between the two camps. It felt like 2008 all over again.
It does seem to have struck a nerve, because you actually have a piece up that actually says Clinton called Obama about this magazine article flap. So it clearly reached a point where she felt like she had to call. Did she apologize? Do you know what prompted the call? Was it just the media attention, or was there an indication that the president was upset when he saw her comments?
It was described to me as a clearing the air kind of a conversation, and basically it was a semi-apology, and she was basically saying that people are making too much of this, I think is what she basically told Obama. This has been 2 days of back and forth between the camps, and basically our newspaper doesn't like to use anonymous sources, especially when they're attacking each other, so we didn't do that much with it on Sunday and Monday, but behind the scenes people were very upset, particularly in the Obama camp. And finally we started seeing things on the record. Early yesterday morning, David Axelrod tweeted out the explanation of what Obama meant by saying don't do stupid stuff. It basically means don't occupy Iraq, which has been a disastrous decision. And then we heard in the afternoon that Mrs. Clinton had made this phone call to the president to try to smooth things over, if you will. You know, it's a tricky position for Clinton trying to run and succeed a president of her same party. It's something that Vice President George H.W. Bush had to do back in 1988. It's something Al Gore had to try to do in 2000. Bush was successful, Gore wasn't. But you basically got to separate yourself in some cases from this president that you served, and that's very difficult to do.
Well, it's interesting that you brought that up because it appears as though since we presume that she is mounting a campaign for 2016 where a large part of her record will focus on foreign policy in her time as Secretary of State, that she's staking out a position that is to the right of Obama when it comes to the crises that we've seen in Syria, even the developing situation in Iraq. But when you take the temperature of the American public, the majority now being war weary don't actually seem to agree that the U.S. should have had more involvement in Syria, or even that we should be bombing Iraq once again. So how does this kind of play out for her? First of all, do you see 2016 as being a return to foreign policy as the central kind of issue for the presidential election? And what is her thinking running to the right of Obama, or is she just genuinely more hawkish?
Well, I think she is generally more hawkish. Like it's very tricky politics. I think she is trying to draw a contrast with the Obama administration, which is perceived as being a little too low-key on foreign policy. You know, we had the Bush administration that was super aggressive. Now the critics say the Obama administration isn't aggressive enough, and I think you'll see Clinton try to stake out a kind of a middle position, basically saying we should be more active than the don't do stupid stuff faction, but we shouldn't be as reckless, if you will, as the Bush administration was. And I think that the base of the Democratic Party is going to have a slight problem with that, but at the present time, I don't see any candidate that can actually defeat her in the primary if she chooses to run. So I think she's already looking ahead to the general election. And I do think among independents there's some concern about the world situation, and a lot of that's going to rub off on President Obama, and whoever runs for president is going to have to address that.
Now, I do want to bring up Iraq real quick because the president, it's been several days now since he announced targeted and limited airstrikes. Do we know if those airstrikes are having any impact thus far? Because the Pentagon has tried to be cautious in the way that they're measuring whether the U.S. is actually influencing the situation on the ground. And there's also been a lot of hesitation on the part of the administration because they say that ISIS is so well trained, so well equipped that they're not sure what kind of impact they could have.
That's a very interesting question because I'm hearing rumblings out of the Pentagon that there's a lot of concern about whether we are doing enough to try to defeat ISIS. The bottom line I'm hearing from them is that they feel like the airstrikes are working in terms of keeping ISIS in place, but in terms of rolling back ISIS or actually defeating them, they're not sure that we have enough manpower or weapons power there. So that's going to be I think that's going to be a concern moving forward. So basically, the White House says the strikes have been successful. The Pentagon say that the strikes have been successful, but only at keeping the status quo. And I think the primary object right now is to try to get those religious minorities off the mountain where they're trapped. I mean, that's like a super priority one right now, and there is evidence that some of those people have been evacuated, but that's an ongoing process.
Absolutely. An ongoing process that we will be following. David, thanks so much for joining us today. That was David Jackson, White House correspondent for USA Today. You can follow him on Twitter at DJUSA Today. Time for us to take a short break, but we will be back with you. Keep watching The Bill Press Show.
This is The Bill Press Show.
When I started learning about nutrition, about which, by the way, much less is known than you might think, I learned that what mattered most about one's health was not necessarily the nutrients, good or bad, that you were consuming or staying away from, or even the calorie counts. But what predicted a healthy diet more than anything else is the fact that it was being cooked by a human being and not a corporation. Corporations cook very differently than people do. They use vast amounts of salt, fat, and sugar, much more than you would ever use in your own cooking. And the reason they do that is those are three incredibly attractive and incredibly cheap ingredients. And when they're layered properly, as in a chip or pastries and forms of junk food, they're incredibly addictive. They really press our buttons. They activate our dopamine network, our cravings. And in fact, people in the industry, they don't talk about addiction in the food industry, even though they traffic in addiction. They talk about craveability. It's the same thing. And snackability is another term they use. It's a lovely word. And then the last point about corporate cooking that's important to understand is they cook different stuff than you do at home. What they're good at, in general, they don't cook that well, but things like chips, they cook incredibly well. And here's a classic food that if you make it yourself, if you've ever made French fries, you have to wash the potatoes, you have to peel the potatoes, you have to slice the potatoes, you have to fry them in a lot of oil, you have to spatter your entire stovetop, you have to clean up, and then you have this pot of oil you have to get rid of. I mean, it's really difficult, and it's a pain. They're wonderful, but it's a pain. And if you make them yourself, you'll only eat them every 6 weeks, 2 months, because it's too much work. But when you let corporations cook for you, it's so simple and so inexpensive, and they're really good, that you will have them twice a day, as many people in America do. So you see the kinds of foods you end up with are these labor-intensive foods and desserts. These special occasion foods become everyday foods when we let industry cook for us. Eat anything you want, just cook it yourself.
At Earth Justice, we defend the environment in the courtroom. Join our fight. When you take a seat, you take a stand. Earth Justice, because the Earth needs a good lawyer.
Seen on Free Speech TV and online on TawkrTV. This is the Bill Press Show.
Welcome back to the Bill Press Show. I'm Sabrina Siddiqui, politics reporter with the Huffington Post, filling in for Bill this morning. We were talking about Ferguson and the police shooting death of Michael Brown, an unarmed black teenager, and I feel like it's a good time to look back at what Chris Rock actually had to say when a man jumped the White House gate and was firing shots in the air.
Who already? What has it been? 3 weeks and already somebody took a shot at him.
No, that's right. That guy jumped the fence or whatever, and they shot. I knew it wasn't a brother because they shot him in the leg. I was like,
I mean, I knew it wasn't a brother because they shot him in the leg. I don't think you could sum it up any better than that.
I think that there is a real disconnect between white America and black America, of what black people go through when they see police,
right,
and what white people go through when they see police.
I mean, officers say, and this is true, that the standards do not permit them to shoot to wound. If they do fear that there is a significant threat to either themselves or people around them, then they have to use deadly force. That is the protocol, but it's clear, even if you look at what Chris Rock jokingly said, but is the truth. There are certainly situations where they don't use deadly force, and more often than not, it's when you're not dealing with minorities.
By the way, just a quick story. Anonymous, the computer hacker site, they have said that they are going to hack into police data to find out the name of the police officer who shot Michael Brown, because we still don't know.
Which is outrageous, too. They say there might be too much of a threat, therefore they're not releasing his name. Whether or not that's true, we don't know, but we will be taking a break, and we will be back with you shortly. Keep watching The Bill Press Show.
This is The Bill Press Show.
All right. I know this isn't any fun to talk about, but we should. Okay. So who's going to do what? I'll pack the dead batteries. Great.
I'll only put what I don't need into a duffel bag.
Perfect. That's totally unhelpful.
No problem.
Meanwhile, I will try to comfort everyone by speaking in a calm voice.
And I'll try to get the generator going without any gas.
Oh, let's not forget the cell phones, which probably won't work.
Right.
And who is going to handle supplies?
I can forget to do a list for us.
Thanks, pal.
Well, I think we couldn't be any less prepared. I'm proud of you guys.
Talk to your kids about who to call, where to meet, what to pack. Visit ready.gov/kids for tips and information.
What gets you into college? Good SAT scores? High GPA? Lots of extracurriculars?
Sure, but what you really need is money.
If you don't have the cash, you'll need a loan.
And we mean huge student loans because the cost of college has risen 1,000% in the last 30 years.
This means big money for the banks that collect fees and interest.
Now, millions of young people are starting their adult lives with an average of $29,000 of loans on their backs.
Altogether, we're talking $1.2 trillion in student debt.
And more people are finding it impossible to pay them back. Welcome to the student debt crisis.
The increasing demand for higher education and cuts to state funding gave colleges a huge incentive to keep inflating prices.
I graduated about a year ago, currently in $35,000 of debt.
I am in debt about like $25,000.
I owe $23,000.
I owe over $50,000 in student loans.
38.8 million Americans owe money on a student loan. And the biggest names in banking are making huge profits off the booming student loan industry. Sallie Mae, the largest provider of private student loans, made $949 million last year.
They only give you about 6 months to look for a job. You have to start paying back the loan. It's very pressuring, especially nowadays. It's very hard to find a job.
Over half of the students graduating in 2012 could not find a decent paying job.
They either had low-wage jobs or unpaid internships or were unemployed altogether.
So you can't make the payments. You start incurring late fees, which makes the loan even harder to pay off.
And it stays with you for years, even decades.
Right now, a third of the people who started repaying their loans are delinquent or in default.
That's 13.7 million people, more than the populations of Chicago, New York, and San Francisco combined.
Worse, it's not just the borrowers who are in trouble. Many loans require co-signers.
So if the student is unable to pay, that co-signer, a father, a mother, or a grandparent, is now on the hook.
Even a grandparent's Social Security benefits can be garnished to pay the loan.
We should have an answer to this. If you get really behind in your car payment or your credit cards, you can file for bankruptcy.
But Congress has made it nearly impossible to discharge student loans through bankruptcy.
Big institutions make big profits while students try to make ends meet under crushing debt.
Is this how we want our education system to work?
The whole point of going to college is to get the career you want, but lately that's been discouraged because no one can afford school. You get a job just to pay off your student loans.
We need higher education, not higher debt.
Sign up to end the student debt crisis at higherednotdebt.org.
I wrote Black Stats because I wanted to compile an easy reference of contemporary information to help inform our conversations about Black America's current conditions.
The final play, take me through it.
Well, I'm the best corner in the game. When you try me with a sorry receiver like Crabtree, that's the result you're going to get. Don't you ever talk about me.
The way in which he was cast as a thug and the way in which people negatively responded to him engaging based purely on his appearance and his so-called cockiness, I think is associated with a stat that we found, how Black players are 67% of the players in the NFL, but they receive 92% of the unsportsmanlike conduct penalties. There's this ongoing criminalization and negative or destructive public narrative associated with being cocky and Black. Over time, this very destructive image of a welfare, sort of the welfare queen, has played a role in how people respond to poverty and, I guess, among Black women. Black people now account for less than a third of TANF recipients. So this idea of a Black welfare queen really just has no credence and is not really justifiable. Often in education, we hear, probably more often than not, that Black parents are not engaged in conversations about education at home. In fact, 83% of Black high school students have had their homework checked at home, compared with 57% of white students and 59% of Asian students. The popular narrative for so many years has been, there are more Black men in prison than in college.
We have more work to do when more young Black men languish in prison than attend colleges and universities across America.
And that's not true. Today, there are 600,000 more Black men in college than there are in prison. So in the conversation about progress, 84% of Black Americans aged 25 and older now have a high school diploma or better, compared to just 31% in 1970. And 20% of Black Americans have a college degree or better, compared with just 4% from 1970. So there is a story of progress. The other thing I wanted to say that is least talked about is the level of service among Black college students. HBCUs, historically Black colleges and universities, actually have the highest rate of student involvement in service than any other colleges. And that level of civic engagement is a story that we could definitely tell much more.
Broadcasting around the nation, on your radio, on your TV, and online. This is The Bill Press Show.
Welcome back to The Bill Press Show. I'm Sabrina Siddiqui, politics reporter with the Huffington Post, filling in for Bill this morning. We've had a great first hour, in large part thanks to some help from my friends, Elise Murphy running the board.
Hey, good morning.
Hello. Alicia Cruz, who is screening our calls. Cyprian Bolding, videographer, making us look good, and Peter Ogburn, our executive producer.
Hi, Sabrina.
Always a pleasure. Hello.
Nice to be in the studio with you today.
Very nice to be
in.
Very nice to be back. And we've actually got Congressman Gregory Meeks with us on the phone, representative from the 5th District of New York. Good morning, Congressman. How are you?
Very good. Good morning. Good being with you, Sabrina.
Thank you so much for joining us. Congressman, we've been talking about Ferguson this morning and the police shooting death of Michael Brown, an unarmed Black teenager who was on his way back to his grandmother's house on Saturday. I would like to please get your reaction to that and the developing situation in Ferguson, where we've seen a lot of protests over this particular slaying.
Well, obviously, it seems like there's another scenario based upon what we've seen thus far, where an unarmed Black male was shot down by the police. And it seems as though information is being slow to come out of the police department there, as well as the revelation of who the officer is. This has got to stop. This is coming on the heels of what took place here in my city in New York, in Staten Island, where another, unarmed African-American male was killed. And so that kind of apparent profiling is something that cannot be tolerated. And for me, what seems to be perplexing and what takes and aggravates the situation even worse is when you have these kinds of acts that takes place, instead of individuals who are part of the police department, et cetera, coming out and decrying it as wrong and as well as trying to make sure that those individuals who've committed those acts are further prosecuted, they seem to be, folks want to defend them or take up, and that's what exacerbates the situation and cause the kind of angst I think that you've seen with reference to the aftermath over in St. Louis. They want individuals who've broken the law, and to me, it seems, I know from the video that I've seen in New York, clearly that there was an illegal chokehold, and we still haven't had an indictment or anything there, that individuals who supposed to have taken an oath to protect individuals, when they break that law and that trust, they should be held accountable also, just like anyone else.
Now, you also mentioned your Eric Garner in New York, and this is, as you said, the second instance in just a couple of weeks where a young African American has been confronted by police who's unarmed and killed for no apparent reason. And the Justice Department has said that it is going to investigate what happened in Ferguson. Do you think that that's the appropriate first step? What else do you think needs to be done in terms of a response?
No, I think that is. I know. That Congressman Lacy Clay and Congresswoman Marsha Fudge, who's the chair of the Congressional Black Caucus, with reference to the Ferguson case, has written to the Attorney General asking that they get involved. And in the New York case, Congressman Hakeem Jeffries and myself and Charles Rangel and Yvette Clark, we've also written because we don't believe that the DA in Staten Island, who has indicated that he doesn't think that doesn't necessarily mean that crime has been committed, that it would be appropriate for the Attorney General to then get involved, and we need him involved, because I think that all what folks can ask for at this stage of the game is the appropriate justice, that justice be had. And I think people want to know, one of the things that I'm always upset about is this so-called blue wall of silence. Instead of individuals speaking out, and, some of the language and some of the comments made by, I know in New York, for example, the head of the Police Benevolent Association, those were further insight as opposed to saying we're going to get to the bottom of it and we're going to make sure justice is had, to just then come up and try to protect individuals when, you see what is taking place. That's what causes the kind of reaction that you've seen in St. Louis.
Absolutely. And Congressman, I want to switch gears to Iraq now. I know that you have said you are supportive of the president's decision to send American personnel, troops in an advisory role to Iraq, as well as to provide humanitarian assistance. At the same time, the administration also has pursued a limited campaign of airstrikes, and there are certainly some of your colleagues in the Senate, Democrats, who have expressed concerns, such as Tim Kaine, Dick Durbin, Chris Murphy, over the issue of airstrikes. Do you feel like airstrikes are justified, and are you confident that they can be kept targeted and limited as the administration has pledged?
Yeah, I think that the president has always kept his word when he said what he was going to do. When we had the airstrikes in Libya, he indicated that they were going to be limited to airstrikes and that our NATO allies would come in, and that's exactly what he did when he decided, because the scenario in Syria, we were unclear as to who the rebels were, and so therefore there were no weapons that were, given or arming the rebels there. Some criticized him for it, but I say that when you look at the end result, it was absolutely right, because one of those rebels against the Syria regime was ISIS, so you could have been very well arming them. So that was the right thing to do. Now, we had hoped that in Iraq, that by giving, strengthening the government of Baghdad, and that they would then also give out, weapons and make sure that those Kurds would have protections against the ISIS, or so they could protect themselves. Because of the malfunctioning government there, where the former Prime Minister Maliki did not have a government of Kurds and Shias and Sunnis, he divided them basically. The Kurds have not had the weapons to properly protect themselves from ISIS. And so we have a scenario that we have this group that you look at some of the vicious acts that they've been committing, and where a possible genocide could take place. The president had no choice but to then say, we're going to stop this genocide. And that's why the bombing has taken place, and I think legitimately so. And I think what has to take place now, furthermore, because I do not, under no circumstances do I think that we should have U.S. troops on the ground, or return to Iraq in any shape, form, or fashion. But we've got to believe, I believe that we've got to now arm the Kurds who have shown the ability and the courage to fight off ISIS. And while they are getting that equipment, etc., we've got to make sure that there's no further incursions on their territory. And so the limited bombing that the president has, because the president has ordered, helps prevent this onslaught that would have taken place but for the bombing. And so we've got to give the Kurds, level that playing field, so that they can then be the fighters on the ground. Since there's not going to be any, and the president has been explicitly clear, there will not be any U.S. troops on the ground. So the Kurds and the Kurdish army will be those troops on the ground, but they need to have the proper equipment so they can have a level playing field to push back against ISIS.
And Congressman, you mentioned your confidence in this being a limited campaign, as the president has said. But at what point, as this continues, because the administration also said this certainly will not be a short operation. It will take time, especially to have impact, given how well trained and well equipped ISIS is. So at what point does the administration have to come back and seek congressional approval for the actions that they take, or do you think that the president can continue to act unilaterally? Does he have the authority to continue with the campaign, with the campaign of airstrikes?
Well, I would hope that the president, I think should keep Congress, and he has thus far, keep us apprised and up to date to what's going on. And it's hard to do during the recess because you can't have those kinds of briefings. Classified briefings over the telephone. So at some point, I would think that there would be some classified briefings, and those members that want to get back to find out what's going on, we should get back and do that. I do. I would love the president to make sure that there's further consultation and back and forth. I think he has the power to do what he's doing. My concern is, just the political nature of Congress right now. That's really where I'm concerned. It used to be in time of crises, just way back even initially in 2001 after 9/11, we came back and we would just try to focus for the good of the nation on what's the best thing to do, and gave George Bush the power at that particular time to do certain things, and turned out to be the wrong thing to do, of course, as opposed to going, well, I don't want to get into all of that, but at any rate, it seems as though that anything that this president does, some are trying to say the opposite just for political gain without looking at the entirety of the circumstances. I would hope that that we would move away from that, but I don't see any evidence as of this date where if the president says X, they're going to say A. So I would get concerned about us then getting marred down into political squabbles while the possible genocide is going on. I think that we have, and the president is doing exactly the right thing to make sure that we avoid any genocides. I know when I first came in, I'll just give an example, where it seemed as though when I first got elected to Congress back in 1998, situation in Bosnia, where we came together and said we had to make sure that a genocide did not take place in Bosnia. And that was done by air. No troops were lost on the ground or anything of that nature. I think we have the same circumstance here. Former President Clinton said the one area where he wished he had acted, and he did not, was what took place with the genocide in Somalia. So we can't have, in Rwanda. So we can't have that scenario again on our block. So I believe that the president is doing exactly the right thing.
Thank you so much, Congressman, for joining us this morning. We appreciate having you on the show. That was Congressman Gregory Meeks from the 5th District of New York, supporting the president's actions thus far on Iraq. You can follow him on Twitter at Gregory Meeks. We're going to take a short break, but keep watching The Bill Press Show. We'll be back shortly.
This is The Bill Press.
Tune into Free Speech TV for Democracy Now!, a national, independent, award-winning news program bringing you people and perspectives rarely seen on corporate media.
Grunt work. Love it, hate it, useful, not useful.
Necessary.
Our social entrepreneurs are people who have been on the front lines of social change. I've learned so much from talking with them. This is Cafe Impact, and I'm Jonathan Lewis.
I will say that I think is a challenge for anyone, especially the new workforce as they come in, is the ability to accept grunt work with grace.
The most boring, awful details are the most important elements of doing this work. From the way you save names in your Rolodex to the way you bank and you deposit checks. The truth is, this work isn't glamorous, it's rewarding. You don't go into this for the glamour, you go into it for the impact. And so it takes that determination to do the scut work to actually get anywhere.
It can be really challenging in a first job for someone who's coming out of finishing school to have the enthusiasm that they do to make the type of social impact that they've dreamed of. And now they're here in this first job and all of a sudden they're shouldered with all this grunt work. And they don't understand and they don't get it and they're resentful.
Talk more about the power of answering phones.
Sure, I did that myself, took out the trash, cleaned offices when I had to, and it's all good. There's power in being a good team player and in being somebody who sometimes has to support other people's leadership before you get to have your own moment in the sun.
Is it hard to wait?
It is absolutely hard to wait, especially if you're an alpha female like I am.
I think grunt work can help a new employee build trust internally and teach them the nuances of how an organization is run so that they can have a real good sense of what HR is doing, what finance is doing, what all the other departments are, and that actually makes them a better employee in the long run.
So in my role on a daily basis, I literally can be looking at a new venture in software. We could be looking at a microfinance deal. I could be making coffee, taking out the trash, and riding a tractor on any given day.
Have you found people who thought it was demeaning that they were given this job, work in the front office and make the coffee when they graduated with all A's from this great university? And,
people like that just don't last very long in our world. If your approach to life is that, you're so smart and you're such a fabulous entrepreneur that you can't understand why people aren't giving you opportunities, it's really hard to advance.
Tune in to Gay USA with hosts Ann Northrup and Andy Hum for in-depth coverage of lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender news. Watch Gay USA every week, only on Free Speech TV.
At Earth Justice, we defend the environment in the courtroom. Join our fight. When you take a seat, you take a stand. Earth Justice, because the Earth needs a good lawyer.
Seen on Free Speech TV and online on TawkrTV. This is The Bill Press Show.
Welcome back to The Bill Press Show. I'm Sabrina Siddiqui, politics reporter at the Huffington Post, filling in for Bill this morning. Peter, we've been getting through the show and had a lot of great debate today.
Something.
Oh, no.
I don't want to hijack anything.
Oh, no. You've hijacked it already. Keep going.
So I during the break I was looking at the Instagram.
Okay.
Because we follow each other on Instagram.
This is Instagram for those who can't follow his short.
Thank you for that.
Time is money. MTV. My time is valuable. So on Instagram, you put up a shot of the studio, and you got one comment on it from Dante Stallworth.
Yeah.
Former NFL player.
Dante is a friend of
what are you talking about?
The Huffington Post.
That's great.
He is, and it actually is a testament to how social media is a really cool thing, because we noticed that he would often tweet things from the Huffington Post, and he started following a couple of us on Twitter. We followed him back, and that's how we started communicating, and he just came by the office to visit us a couple times, and friendship developed that way. Eventually, from Twitter, we moved to this Instagram, which is actually the same amount of syllables as Instagram, by the way. So you're not Instagram. You're not shortening anything.
Glad you counted that one out, Peter.
It's early.
It is early.
The gram.
If you have a take on whether we should call Instagram or Instagram, or more important things, you can reach us at 866-55-PRESS, 866-557-7377. You can also like us on Facebook, facebook.com/Bill Press Show. Tweet us at BP Show. Many ways to engage with us this morning. One thing I wanted to bring up just real quick, though, is the tragic death of Robin Williams. Really shook the nation the day before yesterday when the news came out in suicide. We know he had suffered from severe depression. I think it really shed light for many on the mental health issues that so many face in this country today.
It sucks. It's just a sad story. Just all around, it just sucks. And it makes me sad. And it bums me out because, he's such a talented guy. And left so much good stuff. But, we have to collectively get past this whole idea that we can't talk about mental illness. Mm-hmm. And that it's something that is taboo or is a sign of weakness by talking about it.
I want to play, actually, since he left so much good stuff, a quick clip of Robin Williams on Conan O'Brien's show.
I had a parrot once, and do not, in any form, put them in your bedroom because you think, well, it'd be lovely to wake up to the parrot.
Yeah.
Because they hear everything.
Yeah.
And there you'll have the bird out, and it'll one day be sitting there, and what a lovely bird, and the bird will go, not in the ass!
So many memorable moments with Robin Williams, but you're right. There's a stigma still when it comes to talking about depression or other mental health conditions. And there are people who just don't understand. They say, how could someone who had it all
he's so happy,
be so unhappy? And that really just overlooks the severity of the disease and the fact that it's not just about people seeking help. It's about offering people help too. You can also try to really reach out to people that might be suffering internally who might not be getting the help they need.
And, over the years, I think we've all seen or dealt with someone in our own life that may have been maybe dealing with depression and some form of mental illness. And the thing that I've learned anyway is to, be available for people when they need your help. And push them to get help. Find outlets for them to get help. It's just
the pushing is key because it's not easy. There's a lot you could say about it, but really access to mental health care is really difficult for a lot of people to find. And not only is it difficult to find a doctor, a lot of them don't take insurance, especially when it comes to therapists. You have to pay out of pocket. People can't afford it. So it's something that I think requires a lot more than meets the eye. And hopefully, this tragic death of someone who was so loved by so many people will shed light a little more on that situation. I don't know if people have a favorite Robin Williams movie or role, but if you do, you should tweet it to us at BP Show, or feel free to call us at 866-55-PRESS if you just wanted to share something that you loved about him. But we will be talking about a lot more after taking a break. Keep tuning in. Stay with us at The Bill Press Show.
This is The Bill Press Show.
So this is my computer.
This is your computer. Let's go on the internet.
Let's go. Click it.
Yes.
Okay.
I cursor in between the R and the E. Pressing down, I want you to just push the period.
She's gonna love me all over again.
That's it. Jamaica, here you go.
Here we go.
Good job.
Thank you. Thank you. And I did it by myself. Feel smarter.
So, I'm kind of new here, but I've noticed a trend. My human does this funny thing where she goes around and gets all my toys, and then she hides them in that basket by the door. But it's always the same basket, and it's always in the same place. And then she acts so surprised when I find them, but, she's putting them in the same basket. Again. It's like, hello, that's where you put it last time. You were the worst at hide and go seek.
So, same time next week?
Well, of course. Put away a few bucks, feel like $1 million. For free tips to help you save, go to Feed the Pig.
All right. I know this isn't any fun to talk about, but we should. Okay. So who's going to do what?
I'll pack the dead batteries.
Great.
I'll only put what I don't need into a duffel bag.
Perfect. That's totally unhelpful.
No problem.
Meanwhile, I will try to comfort everyone by speaking in a calm voice.
And I'll try to get the generator going without any gas.
Oh, let's not forget the cell phones, which probably won't work.
Right.
And who is going to handle supplies?
I can forget to do a list for us.
Thanks, pal.
Well, I think we couldn't be any less prepared. I'm proud of you guys.
Talk to your kids about who to call, where to meet, what to pack. Visit ready.gov/kids for tips and information.
Hey, thanks for stopping by. I followed your character since the first episode. I'm a big fan. Big fan.
Thank you.
And listen, your storyline, it makes for incredible TV drama. Thing is, your drug use is very adult content. Too adult for the kids. So I'm gonna have to block you.
Oh, man.
Yeah. Well, have a good one.
You're a nice lady.
with The Bill Press Show on Twitter. Follow us at BP Show and tweet using the hashtag WatchingBP. This is The Bill Press Show.
Welcome back to the Bill Press Show. I'm Sabrina Siddiqui, politics reporter at the Huffington Post, and filling in for Bill on this beautiful morning. And we have one of our friends, Rebecca Sinderbrand, political news editor for the Washington Post. Now, congratulations on the new job, newish.
Newish, yeah, it started last week, so it's still pretty
Okay,
new. Yeah,
that's new enough.
Yeah.
You can follow Rebecca on Twitter at Sinderbrand. She's here to fill us in on everything happening at the White House these days. The president, of course, is out in Martha's Vineyard.
Yeah, or White House North, as they're calling it. So.
White House North is the new phrase, I guess, that they've used. And while he's out there, of course, there are airstrikes that his administration has decided to pursue in Iraq. There are a number of foreign crises, still ongoing conflict over in Gaza. And also Syria is very much still happening, being brought back into light given some of the forces who've come in from Syria into Iraq when we look at ISIS and the origination of the group. So some people want to ask, why is the president on vacation? Is that a tired kind of criticism?
We hear this of course, the pushback you hear from White House officials is the president only takes working vacations. Wherever he goes, the White House travels with him. Of course, this week, kind of an interesting thing, we know that the president later on in the week is actually going to be coming back to Washington briefly. Of course, raising the question of if he's got all the White House communication there, what can he do there? But apparently there's meetings at the White House. He's going to come back to D.C. and then head straight back out to Martha's Vineyard.
How long is he coming back to D.C. for?
For about 2 days.
2 days. It's interesting. It almost implies that while the president is in fact always working, and this criticism has been raised for almost every president that there's been, it seems like they are concerned then about the optics if he is actually going to come back to D.C. physically when he could just very well conduct meetings.
Well, of course, now we can say that the president is not taking a straight 2-week vacation. There are going to be images of him, and we can guarantee this, at the White House during those 2 days that he's back.
I mean, he also spoke yesterday on the situation in Iraq as well as the day before. So that's back-to-back statements for the public, not necessarily giving a lot of news. Certainly yesterday's didn't seem to be anything that hadn't already been said before.
Right.
So it does seem like they're trying to make him more visible.
Right.
Is that
the
part
message
of
is the president is on the job, obviously. I mean, we're hearing depressing headline out of depressing headline coming out of Iraq. And, if there's any sense that the president is in any way disengaged, particularly as there is this mobilization of U.S. forces to address the situation, that wouldn't exactly be the image they're going for.
Now, one other thing that will happen today while he's on vacation is he's going to see an old buddy of his former Secretary of State, Hillary Clinton, who made a little bit of news, or a lot bit of news maybe, more than was intended, when she criticized his approach to foreign policy. Now, mind you, this was sort of a secondhand account of his approach from some off-the-record statement he gave somewhere that was later reported as his foreign policy don't do stupid stuff. Maybe using
which is
another
hard
word.
to argue with, obviously, just in general for presidents. Yeah.
Now, Hillary, I want to read what she had to say about that. She said, great nations need organizing principles, and don't do stupid stuff is not an organizing principle.
And then, of course, followed by that infamous tweet that rocketed around the web from David Axelrod that's saying that, hey, don't do stupid stuff would basically mean don't invade Iraq. And, of course, unstated, but very much part of that equation is the fact that Hillary Clinton voted to authorize.
It's like 2008 all over again is what one of our guests earlier, David Jackson from USA Today, was saying. Kind of a bit of a taking shots at each other. And she also disagreed with the president on Syria, saying that they should have been more involved earlier on, and actually adopting what mostly Republicans have said, which is that ISIS and the way that they've been able to infiltrate Iraq is in large part due to the fact that the administration did not arm Syrian rebels early. They gave ISIS an opportunity to make gains, to expand themselves. And do you think that she genuinely believes that? What it seems like iffy politics, though, because it's not something that would play out with her base.
Right. Well, there's a couple of questions around here, right? The question that's surrounded so much of what Hillary Clinton has had to say on this book tour has been, did she really mean to say that? And then the question beyond that is, okay, if she meant to say it, what did she expect would follow? And if she didn't mean to say it, boy, she's rustier than people thought. And of course, you saw liberal groups yesterday, progressive groups, coming out immediately and saying, hey, move on, and others saying, hey, Hillary, I'm not sure that you actually want to relitigate this whole past fight over Iraq. I'm not sure that this is something that you want to raise right now. And Hillary Clinton herself, very quick to come out and say, I'm not trying to put daylight between myself and the president. Of course, you had that statement from her spokesman saying that when they see each other tonight, the two of them are going to see each other at a party at Vernon Jordan's house, that they're going to hug it out.
Mm-hmm.
And so, definitely realizing, of course, going into damage control mode very quickly. But of course, it would be preferable for her future presidential run, if there is one, if she didn't have to go into damage control quite so frequently.
Yes, and it does seem like on her part, there seems to be some concern, especially since she served as Obama's Secretary of State, that inevitably when she runs for president, as we've all assumed she will, a lot of the election will possibly be about foreign policy, much like it was in 2008, just because many parts of the world appear to be in crisis. If you look at Ukraine, if you look at Gaza and the escalation of the conflict once again, and if you look at Syria, if you look at Iraq, people are still, of course, Republicans upset about Benghazi, so Libya is not something that has been entirely put in the past. And there seems to be reluctance on her part to be associated with Obama. Not entirely. She does say, of course, she was proud to serve him, but that perhaps the criticism of his foreign policy will reflect onto her.
But some of the people who have been watching the situation say, whether or not it's actually criticism of Obama, what it actually reflects is, despite, and she's very aware, obviously, of the situation she faces with progressive groups and how they feel about the foreign policy she ran back in 2008 and what they view as the mistake she made with her vote on Iraq. But on foreign policy, she seems to have kind of a fundamentally different worldview, or a slightly more conservative worldview on foreign policy than many people within the administration. And so this isn't so much criticism of the president as an expression of exactly where her worldview is on these questions.
And it also seems to me that she doesn't think that she actually needs the base. She seems to, at least if she's going to stake out positions there to the right of Obama on the issue of foreign policy, when progressives actually think that he's been too involved in some of these conflicts, that she kind of feels that she will inevitably have their support, because there isn't going to be a real primary challenge. There might be a person or two who stands up, but she will be the candidate. She will be the nominee if she runs. And so she doesn't have to really go out of her way.
Right. And the calculation, the question actually is, how far she can kind of push, how many of these kind of moments can we have before there is some sort of a tipping point. At this point, it doesn't seem that there is one. You get these strongly worded statements from progressive groups, but it doesn't seem to be any kind of groundswell kind of pushing in the other direction. That sense of inevitability once again bubbling up. It's feeling very deja vu back to 7-8 years ago. But so we'll see exactly where things head from here.
Absolutely. I want to remind everyone how they can tune in and give us a call at 866-55-PRESS, 866-557-7377. Tweet us at BP Show if you want to participate in this conversation. If you have any views on Hillary Clinton and what exactly you think about her foreign policy views and the fact that she is very clearly to the right of the president. But we'll take a quick break, and we will be back with Rebecca Sinderbrand. Keep watching The Bill Press Show.
This is The Bill Press Show.
Two anti-government, self-described revolutionaries have shot up a pizza restaurant as well as a Walmart in Las Vegas.
The internationally syndicated political series, The David Pakman Show, provides progressive talk, analysis, and interviews with the nation's youngest radio and television host, David Pakman. Find out more and catch up on all the latest episodes by visiting our website at freespeech.org.
most important issue on this planet right now is to protect and conserve biodiversity in the world's oceans. And I don't think people realize just how intimate our connection is with the oceans themselves. Not only do they provide the very foundation of life and control our weather, but life just simply could not exist without a healthy ocean. The real problem, though, is apathy. It's all out of sight, it's all out of mind, and people don't even think about it. But it doesn't matter whether you live in Peoria or on the coast. The fact is, whatever happens in the ocean affects all life forms on the planet Earth. If the oceans die, then civilization collapses. We all die. We cannot live on this planet without the oceans. This is, in fact, not the planet Earth. It's the planet ocean, but because we're a land-dwelling species, we refer to it as Earth. But it is the planet ocean, and the oceans are the heart and the foundation of all life on the planet.
At Earth Justice, we defend the environment in the courtroom. Join our fight. When you take a seat, you take a stand. Earth Justice, because the Earth needs a good lawyer.
Tune into Gay USA with hosts Ann Northrup and Andy Hum for in-depth coverage of lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender news. Watch Gay USA every week, only on Free Speech TV.
On your radio, on TV, and online. This is The Bill Press Show.
Good morning and welcome back to The Bill Press Show. Sabrina Siddiqui here with the Huffington Post filling in for Bill this morning. We've also got Rebecca Sinderbrand in the studio, political news editor for The Washington Post, and we've been talking about Hillary Clinton, her big foreign policy interview, differing in opinion with the president on some big issues. Peter, what are people saying on social media?
Yeah, so we're on Twitter at BP Show, and just a quick comment from CSD Pagan says, Hillary is a neocon, not a Democrat. Just had to put that out there.
Succinct.
Put that out there.
I think neocon might be pushing it a little bit.
Just a touch.
Just a tad bit.
Neocon is awfully strong.
Awfully strong. We've also got David on the line from Oak Brook, Illinois. Good morning, David.
Well, my name is Donald. Well,
Sorry about that, Donald.
Okay. That's quite all right. When I heard about that, that was it for me. I was going to vote for Hillary Clinton. I was all excited with the fact that she's running, but you know something? If she's going to come off against this president, because of the fact he didn't arm the Syrian rebels. Well, if he did arm the Syrian rebels, there's no way in hell they're going to. This group of people was going to stop them. Then he would have been accused for arming the Syrian rebels that we should have sent troops in. There's no happy medium. She might as well just be on Fox News. Now, I got other Democratic friends now. The only reason why they're voting for her now, because they're furious too, is because she's the lesser of two evils.
Well, Hillary Clinton has already lost the vote of Donald, our friend in Oak Brook, Illinois.
Well, it's an illustration of the challenge she faces in some quarters of the party. Donald is not alone. There are other voters, and that's part of what she faced back in 2008, and it's part of what she's going to face this time around.
Yeah, some very strong feelings there.
Look,
she may as well be on Fox News.
She
may as well be on Fox News.
Just a touch, just a hair strong, perhaps.
But it's a very, people feel very strongly about foreign policy. I think there's so much wariness over military intervention, and that's a lot of what the president has taken into consideration, I think, with the approach that he has. Caution not to repeat mistakes of previous administrations, to operate off of bad intelligence, to get involved in something that could be an open-ended conflict. That is how they summarize his approach, at least.
That's right. And, and from her perspective, this is something that she kind of, worked pretty hard to put in the rearview mirror, that this is not something that she felt as though or feels as though she needs to relitigate. She wanted to be past this. And so, if there's a feeling that she needs to continue to address this, it definitely puts her in a difficult spot.
Absolutely. And switching gears a little bit, we've been talking about Ferguson, Missouri a lot this morning, and the shooting death of Michael Brown, an unarmed black teenager, at the hands of a police officer who actually approached Brown and his friend just because they were walking on the street. Nothing, no criminal activity, certainly. And the president did eventually put out a statement. The shooting happened on Saturday. Protests ensued ever since then. Riots, in some cases even looting, in the town of Ferguson. And yesterday, Obama called it heartbreaking. What was the kind of consensus over whether or not it was appropriate for him to put out a statement and the timing of the statement?
When you look at kind of the way that the president addressed this, we live in, and we talked about this, in kind of this sped up media era. We kind of went back because we were curious and looked at past incidents where there's been kind of a racially charged event followed by civil unrest, how long it's taken presidents to weigh in. And, the president is very much in that ballpark. But, very much because we're in this media era where everything's so sped up, people were saying, where's the president on this? Where's the president on this? We're starting to hear that kind of whisper. And so there's this statement. It's interesting to see, the way that you choose to address different kinds of situations. This was a written statement. This was not a statement delivered by the president on camera. It was a very careful statement, a statement that said, offered his condolences, but, urged people to kind of keep their direct their passions into constructive areas. And so, again, a very careful, very cautious, but, obviously very heartfelt statement, calling the loss of Michael Brown heartbreaking.
I think that people forget, even in the shooting death of Trayvon Martin back in 2012, it took a while then, too, for the administration to first comment on just the shooting itself. And then, of course, a year later, when the verdict was handed down, that is when the president delivered a very moving and rare speech on the issue of race. Do you think that some of it also has to do with the fact that it's not just early, but he's on vacation? There are no daily White House press briefings, so there's really no opportunity for reporters to even ask them where they are.
You're in this kind of strange situation too, where it's a continuing situation. So, for instance, when you had the Trayvon Martin tragedy, you had this, the incident occurred, and then there was, the follow-up, but there wasn't this kind of continuing situation on the ground where people were at risk and there was a dangerous situation. And so when you have this kind of continuing situation where things are very delicate and there's a push for calm, every word becomes that much more scrutinized and that much more important.
And do you think that the Justice Department has said that they're going to investigate this matter? Do you think there's a reluctance on the part of the president to kind of, I don't want to say flare up tensions by any means, but there are criticisms certainly he gets from the right for sometimes bringing up the race issue, and there are certainly some conservatives who feel that he has a tendency to be polarizing when he does that. That doesn't actually help. It only separates and divides people further. Do you think that they really want to be cautious in this, and they don't want to bring this up every time just because he is the first black president?
I mean, this has been kind of the history of the president's approach to these particular situations. He's been very reluctant for exactly that reason, and for others as well, to kind of be as blunt as perhaps some people expected him to be. For some people, certainly the Democratic Party would want him to be. In a situation like this, particularly, again, where the tensions continue, you would expect him to kind of stick towards the more cautious end of the spectrum, and that's exactly what he's doing. But again, that's been his general approach. We've seen him become more frank and more forthright about his own personal views on race and on race relations in this country as his term has continued and as he's gotten into his second term in particular, talking very personally, in particular about the Trayvon Martin situation, but in other situations as well. But now would not be one of those times, given kind of the shape of the situation and how things are continuing to unfold.
Absolutely. I do think we'd be hearing a lot more from him if and when there's a conclusion to the Justice Department's investigation. If it turns out that there is that they prove the civil rights crime has been committed. Rebecca Sinderbrand, thank you so much for coming on the show. It's been great talking to you. You can follow her on Twitter at Sinderbrand and keep up with her online at WashingtonPost.com. We will be back shortly. Keep watching The Bill Press Show.
This is the Bill Press Show.
Tune into Free Speech TV for Democracy Now!, a national, independent, award-winning news program bringing you people and perspectives rarely seen on corporate media.
I'm the retired bishop with the Episcopal Church as the bishop for all chaplains in federal service. I read that there was a group of people that represented a sense of injustice that I had. We'd lost Zuccotti. I mean, there was a kind of a hope that maybe Trinity Church would be gracious and give refuge. We picked this day where we would gather and demonstrate that Trinity was closing its ears to what was happening. We marched around the block, and I realized that, my goodness, they're carrying a ladder. And I thought, well, this is the moment. You could feel a spiritual presence. You could feel a certain something. And then the cops came in. It got brutal.
I'm with you right here. Robin, I'm here.
The church needed, in this moment in history, to stand alongside of these protesters. The truth of Christ is found in the pews, is found in the institutional church, but it is also found in the streets. It's found in the honesty and the integrity, the insistence of people that you find in Occupy Wall Street.
Tune in to Gay USA with hosts Ann Northrup and Andy Hum for in-depth coverage of lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender news. Watch Gay USA every week, only on Free Speech TV.
Two anti-government, self-described revolutionaries have shot up a pizza restaurant as well as a Walmart in Las Vegas.
The internationally syndicated political series, The David Pakman Show, provides progressive talk, analysis, and interviews with the nation's youngest radio and television host, David Pakman. Find out more and catch up on all the latest episodes by visiting our website at freespeech.org.
BP Show and tweet using the hashtag WatchingBP. This is the Bill Press Show.
Welcome back to the Bill Press Show. Sabrina Siddiqui with the Huffington Post filling in for Bill. And Peter, I just wanted to bring up this rather absurd story real quick.
Go ahead.
Fox host criticizing Michelle Obama on the issue of nutrition. She has a big, of course, campaign called Let's Move, encouraging healthier eating and exercise, saying, and this was Dr. Keith Abloh.
Oh, Keith Abloh.
And how well could she be eating? She needs to drop a few.
Whoa.
Unbelievable.
She should drop a few?
So inappropriate. But the implication being, who is she?
He said that Michelle Obama needs to drop a few.
Who is incredibly fit. And and his implication is she shouldn't be talking about nutrition standards because she's not fit enough herself, which just makes absolutely no sense for an endemic that continues to face this country. In fact, there was just a poll that came out yesterday showing that the number one concern for adults in America is childhood obesity.
That's crazy. And let's not forget, I mean, since this whole initiative has been underway, I mean, we've seen childhood obesity tick down, which is a good thing.
Good things have come from the standards that she has put in place. And in fact, Fox News senior meteorologist Janice Dean did tweet at Abloh criticizing her colleague. Please keep your comments about women dropping a few to yourself. Sincerely, all women.
Amen.
Good for her.
Good for her. Good for the meteorologist jumping in there on this discussion. You never know what you're going to find, though, on Fox News when you tune in. But really, when they make comments about the First Lady or the children, it's always really uncalled for.
I like that they're fighting with each other, though. That's kind of exciting.
But, after the break, we're going to be joined by my friend and colleague Elise Foley from the Huffington Post to talk immigration. Keep watching The Bill Press Show. We'll be back after this break.
This is The Bill Press Show.
Here reporting from Houston, Texas for Climate Desk. Now, one of the biggest uncertainties in climate science right now is the role of clouds. What better way to work that part out than flying right through them? That's what NASA scientists aboard this airplane think. Welcome to NASA's biggest airborne laboratory. You're coming with us today on an 8-hour NASA flight mission.
When you read these big IPCC climate assessments, what's the biggest uncertainty? There's two, right? The role of aerosols and clouds. Clouds is probably bigger than aerosols.
That is a piece of a puzzle that right now we are missing.
You can't get the models right if you don't understand the chemistry and the process.
Now we're being told we've got to get on. The doors are about to shut, so let's go aboard. Every time you turn on the weather, every time you hear a climate change prediction, that information has to come from somewhere. And it starts by getting sucked out of the air from planes like this.
So this mission is to particularly try to understand the emissions from the surface, so mostly biogenic emissions, so from trees and other plants.
Right now we're flying to our very first part of this experiment on the DC-8. Over Arkansas, there's a particularly pungent bouquet of emissions that scientists are interested in measuring.
Well, these emissions lead to both aerosols and to molecules that both destroy and create ozone. So these are very important things to understand for climate studies.
How it will manifest itself, it will be in more accurate and more reliable predictions.
So what we're doing is taking a series of flyovers, each at a different level of the atmosphere, scooping up those emissions, testing them, and hopefully scientists are going to see exactly what's in this column of air all the way up.
The data that we collect in one flight can keep busy 60 scientists and students for 3 years, 4 years. We're still studying data from data collected 20 years ago.
In fact, this particular mission today is its most heavily equipped in its nearly 30 years of service. Each one of these consoles here is a specially equipped scientific instrument designed to collect all sorts of different data in real time.
And this instrument here tracks the sun.
We're looking at mist chambers. They're used to strip soluble gases.
This black line is the CO2. It's about 390 ppm right now.
We're putting these filters in the bags that we've got the aerosols that we trapped out of a certain amount of air. And so we're sampling up here about 150 liters a minute.
That ultimately flows back into the operational models. It flows back into what goes on TV every day.
Anyway, I got to get this sample going.
You do it. It's a busy man at work. We can't let him rest. Well, get this. We've just spent 2 hours crisscrossing this one cloud formation. In, back out again, back in again.
Then they grow, and we track them as long as we can, and then we let it go.
even one cloud can hold a host of answers to the mysteries of climate change.
The patterns of, where the clouds are, what type of clouds we see, what kind of weather systems they're associated with it, that'll all be shifting in a shifting climate, in a world with climate change.
Then the big spark is when we actually get the meat on the grill. And then it will be some time to process it.
Don't look at me. Your hair's a bit frizzy today. Oh, you should pick that up. Oh, you're such a dork, loser. Here, let me help you with that. Oops.
Every day, kids witness bullying.
Oh, look, your crush is looking at you. Poor you.
They want to help, but don't know how.
See, no one here's gonna help you, because no one
Teach
likes
your
you.
kids how to be more than a bystander. Visit stopbullying.gov.
If you drive buzzed, it could cost you around $10,000. You'll face major legal fees, major fines, and steep insurance penalties. You could lose everything. Nothing kills a buzz like getting pulled over for buzz driving, because buzz driving is drunk driving.
When some people struggle with their mortgage payments, they become frozen, petrified. Not knowing what to do, they do nothing. But the people who take action are far more likely to get the most positive outcome. Making home affordable is a free government program. Call now to talk one-on-one with a housing expert about the options that are right for you. Real help, real answers, right now.
What the frack?
What the frack?
What the frack?
What the frack?
President Obama, are you fracking kidding me?
Reopen the EPA studies. In Texas, Wyoming, and Pennsylvania.
Fracking pollutes our oceans.
Fracking poisons our water.
Fracking makes climate change worse.
Fracking relies on toxic chemicals that cause cancer.
Ban fracking now.
Ban fracking now.
Go on. Ban it.
Ban fracking now.
Please.
Broadcasting around the nation, on your radio, on your TV, and online. This is The Bill Press Show.
Good morning and welcome back to The Bill Press Show. I'm Sabrina Siddiqui, politics reporter with the Huffington Post, filling in for Bill on this morning. We've entered the final hour now of our show, and I couldn't have done it without some help from my friends. Elisa Murphy running the board for us. Hello.
Hey.
Alicia Cruz is screening our calls, and Cyprian Bolding, our videographer, and Peter Ogburn, typical troublemaker in the studio.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Right off the bat, huh?
But right off the bat, as usual, we've
nice to see you too.
It's been a treat. We've got my friend and colleague, politics and immigration reporter at the Huffington Post, Elise Foley. Hello, Elise.
Good morning.
Nice to be with you. You can follow her on Twitter at Elise Foley, and we will be talking about a lot of great immigration-related news. But first,
this is the Full Court Press.
That's right. Just a couple other stories making news. A zoo in China has welcomed what is believed to be the world's first set of panda triplets.
Aww.
You did not saw
that. Triplets.
Did you do that because I'm here today?
Why, you have a panda thing?
Elise.
You have a thing for the pandas?
She loves pandas.
Do you really?
She does.
Do you like 3 pandas?
I love. You know what? I saw a picture of them. They're a little weird looking at
so
this
weird.
age.
They're so tiny.
Panda babies not cute.
I mean, if they'll be cute eventually.
Panda babies like newborns, there's nothing cute about
They look
them.
like little rats when they're newborns.
You mean everybody or pandas?
It's okay, because honestly, like newborns, human newborns aren't exactly all that
are
cute
not
either.
all that cute.
They kind of
Okay.
look like aliens for a little while.
Having fathered a couple of children myself, my kids were not cute when they were first born.
Aww.
I hope they're not watching right now. Confession
But when they were
time.
first born, I mean, one is obviously cuter than the other. But
Name names.
Yeah. Magnus.
Well, clearly I have a favorite. I'm not going to talk about
You
it
said
here.
the older one.
Huh?
You said the older one.
My older one is clearly my favorite child. Yeah. But they're not listening or watching.
But this clip will not be available for posterity.
No, let's just delete this, all of this. Anyway, panda triplets in China, okay? South Korea started its manned space program in 2006, and what they did is they had sort of an audition across the nation to see who could fill their astronaut positions, right? So they had a couple of people, and up until now, there's only been one astronaut left. Yi So-yun is a female engineer who has been the only astronaut in South Korea. Well, she just quit, so the manned space program, the human space program in South Korea is now over. No more
space?
No more space.
You had to audition?
That's what they did. They had like an open casting call for astronauts. You had to prove.
Very strange.
Right? No,
Where do I get a spacesuit?
You had to sort of submit a resume and say like, "Oh, I'm suitable for the space program." So they had engineers, they had scientists,
And then you have to kind of reenact.
Was this all public? Like the whole...
Yeah, back in 2006, and so couple people pulled out of it or stopped, and so this was the last person in the manned space.
Picturing like Gravity before a panel of judges, where they're just like forced into these scenarios, having to respond with what they would do if everything fell
Would
apart.
you or would you not watch that TV show?
I know South Korea's next top.
Well, like the next top astronaut. I don't know. There's something
Probably
there.
not.
A lot of it is science stuff that I feel like wouldn't be very interesting
That's
for
a good
TV.
point. Yeah, immediately tuned out.
Also, Gravity was great, but even 90 minutes of that in real time, after a little while, I'm like, all right, I'm good.
Yeah.
I've seen what it's like up there.
Yeah. And Buffalo, New York, the world's best Scrabble players have descended for the 25th annual National Scrabble Championship. 525 players from 11 countries are all competing for the $10,000 prize to see who is the best Scrabble player in the world.
That sounds so
Speaking
nerdy.
of things I wouldn't want to watch.
Yes.
Only 10 grand?
Yeah,
Also,
10 grand is all you get for being the
10
best Scrabble player in the world.
Are you a good Scrabble player?
You know what? I go words with friends. I'm on that.
For a journalist, I have
Which
to
is
say I'm
similar.
not all that great with word games.
I'm terrible.
I'm not bad with the words with friends thing, which is the same
But
idea.
do people still play that? I thought that was over. That's over.
I'm living the 2011 world. I'm all about the words with friends. I still play.
That's okay.
Anyway, there's a 5-time champion. Is this guy named Nigel Richards? He's Australian, but he lives in Malaysia. Suspect, but one person said, "quote He's like the Michael Jordan of our game."
Oh my God, what does that even mean?
I mean,
he actually probably like
He
plays
puts
with
those
his
words
tongue
together
out.
so
a
fast.
little bit of a stretch to say that there is a Michael Jordan of a Scrabble game.
Yeah. No. This just sounds a little too boring for my taste.
Yeah.
I could barely get through like a regular game of Scrabble with
I think they
friends.
said they play. There are 5 different divisions, and contenders will have played 31 games each over 5 days.
Wow.
What are the divisions?
I think it's based on age.
Oh.
Oh no, with rankings based on win-loss records of the number of points by which they outscore opponents.
Wow.
Like over
Like the
Christmas,
whole league and
over
how they
Christmas
rank
when
in
I
their
have to
league.
play
Okay.
maybe 2 board games with my in-laws, I'm ready to hurt somebody. 31 games over 5 days.
I don't know. It's time to start a fantasy Scrabble league.
No. Oh no, we now know who the Michael Jordan of the game
Yeah.
is.
So
You know who to aspire to be.
it's all settled.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we've got a lot of
given all I
great.
can
You've given all you can give. I want to encourage you guys to call us at 866-55-PRESS, 866-557-7377 if you have any thoughts on the show. And Elise, of course, being our resident immigration reporter at the Huffington Post. You know, it's interesting. We've talked a lot on this show today about some of the foreign crises that have been dominating the news. And in light of Gaza and Iraq in particular, Ukraine. It seems like everyone forgot that there was a border crisis.
Yeah, we have a lot of other crises to talk about. I think that that's definitely true. I think there are a few reasons for that. First of all, there's a lot of stuff going on that's taken, airtime, rightly, from the crisis. Also, the fact that Congress is out. So for the last month or so of especially July, we were looking at Congress and seeing, are they going to do anything? Because a lot of them were perfectly willing to go out and talk about all the things that they wanted to do and the fact that it's a crisis and they need to do something, but not necessarily as willing to actually pass something or at least come together and, get something that could go through both houses, both chambers. So I think that the fact that Congress is now out and there's no real debate on what to do is part of it. The other thing, and, this is a good thing, is that it looks like the numbers are coming down. So you have you have fewer people coming across or getting apprehended coming across the border. They're not sure exactly why that is. I think they're hopeful that it's something like, that the things they're trying to do to curb this are working. There's also a question about whether it's the heat, which, it seems like a small thing, but if you think about it, it makes sense. It's August, it's hot. It's not the best time to do this. And so I think that, just the combination of the fact that Congress is out, the numbers are going down, and there are all these other things to talk about has, taken it out of the national spotlight.
Now Congress skipped town without resolving the issue, as you mentioned, and both chambers tried to move a proposal, and the House, of course, was their plan was one that the White House had called unworkable, significantly reducing the funding requests that the president had put forward, as well as making changes to 2008 law that at least Democrats in the Senate certainly said that they opposed, and many Democrats in the House, save for a few exceptions. The president had said, though, the administration had said that the DHS will run out of money if Congress fails to provide the supplemental funding. So how is that looking? Is the president just going to move money around on his own now?
Yeah, he basically has said, okay, you didn't get me the funding that I needed, or the administration needed, and so I'm going to have to do what I can on my own. And House Speaker John Boehner had even put out a statement with the rest of the GOP leadership saying that the president could do some things on his own, which is kind of funny and ironic. They had just approved this lawsuit against him for doing things on his own. But they're saying that, okay, you can do some stuff on your own with this. And so he said that part of that is just going to be moving some money around. They don't have all the money in the agencies that is appropriated toward these specific things. And they need the money to house, this large number of people, get them through the immigration courts more quickly, which they've said is a real priority. And so I think that that's something that they're certainly doing already and will continue to do until they get the funding that they need.
It's interesting you brought up the hypocrisy and the Republican position, certainly on immigration, that when it comes to the border crisis, the president has the authority. He doesn't need congressional approval. He should just go at it alone and solve this problem himself. When it comes to other areas where he's taken executive action, then suddenly he's breaching the law, worthy of suing. Even in fact, outside of the border crisis, certainly Republicans would be furious, it seems, if he took executive action, for example, on deportations. I don't think then they would say that he's definitely authorized to do that. But are they hearing about this? They're back home in their districts. It was expected that they would certainly get a lot of feedback, especially if they do not resolve or do anything to help resolve, I should say, the border crisis. Has there been any indication that they're getting any feedback from their constituents?
I think that they are, and I think that that's pretty clearly the reason that the House decided to stay in a day longer and do something. I mean, they knew that whatever they did wasn't going to get signed into law, wasn't going to pass the Senate, but the point of doing it was to be able to say that, that they did something. And so this is something that people have been really concerned about. Polling has shown that this has been something that people are really troubled by. And so they don't want to go back and show up at a bunch of town halls and say, we didn't even try. So it's better to come back and say, we did try. The Senate's blocked us. Obama doesn't want to solve the problem. And I think that that's something that they're definitely talking about when they go back to their districts.
Certainly. I feel like when in doubt, blame Obama is definitely an easy way to handle it if you're faced with angry constituents who are asking you about the border. We're going to take a short break, but we will be back soon on the Bill Press Show with Elise Foley. Much more to talk about ahead. Stay tuned.
This is the Bill Press Show.
Don't look at me. Your hair's a bit frizzy today. Oh, you should pick that up. Oh, you're such a dork, loser. Here, let me help you with that. Oops.
Every day, kids witness bullying.
Oh, look. Your crush is looking at you. Poor you.
They want to help, but don't know how.
See, no one here's gonna help you, because no one
Teach
likes
your
you.
kids how to be more than a bystander. Visit stopbullying.gov.
If you drive buzzed, it could cost you around $10,000. You'll face major legal fees, major fines, and steep insurance penalties. You could lose everything. Nothing kills a buzz like getting pulled over for buzz driving, because buzz driving is drunk driving.
When some people struggle with their mortgage payments, they become frozen, petrified. Not knowing what to do, they do nothing. But the people who take action are far more likely to get the most positive outcome. Making home affordable is a free government program. Call now to talk one-on-one with a housing expert about the options that are right for you. Real help, real answers, right now.
Here at the GED Pep Talk Center, we have pep talkers standing by to get you motivated for your GED diploma. Text the name Terry to 69222 for a sympathetic pep talk.
You show people what you really are.
Or for a gentle pep talk, text the name Deborah.
You know you're going to make people very proud of you.
And if that's not enough, text the name Danny for an extreme pep talk.
Prove everyone wrong. Show them you're the boss.
Get your GED pep talk and find free GED classes. Text the name of the person you want a pep talk from to 69222.
Did you see the world differently? Did you celebrate the victory?
So today, I state clearly and with conviction America's commitment to seek the peace and security of a world without nuclear weapons.
Did you stand up against our greatest threat? Change the world.
On your radio, on TV, and online. This is The Bill Press Show.
Welcome back to The Bill Press Show. Sabrina Siddiqui here from the Huffington Post, filling in for Bill. And We were talking to Elise Foley, my colleague and friend from HuffPost Takeover.
HuffPost Takeover to kick off the hour.
To kick off the hour about immigration reform. Elise, of course, our immigration reporter. And we were talking about the border crisis, and in particular, the issue of Republicans saying that Obama has authority to handle this himself. Now, on the other side, there are immigration advocates who say that there's a lot of steps Obama can take himself on another issue, and that has to do with halting deportations. And Elise, you have this article up with Sam Stein. Democrats lay groundwork for Obama to take big steps on immigration. What are we expecting from this administration?
Well, he's been getting pushed for a really long time from advocates that, they need to do something. He's had record deportation numbers a lot of the years. And so they're saying that, now is not the time to do something like making it so that fewer people who are, say, parents of U.S. citizen children or spouses of U.S. citizens, making sure that they are not being deported, keeping people maybe who have no criminal records from being deported, making it so that people who would get legal status under the Senate bill would not be deported. And so right now they're sort of weighing their options. They're trying to figure out what would be the best way to go about this. Some people have estimated it might be in the $5 to $6 million range. If it was, based on the Senate bill, it could be as much as million. Did I say billion before? The $8 million range. So it's gonna be big. It looks like. We don't know what it's gonna be, but it looks like it's gonna be something that's gonna have, huge implications for the undocumented population and probably huge political implications as well.
No, the political implications is interesting because one of the arguments that Republicans put forward amid the border crisis is that this is directly because of DACA, the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, policy, I should say, that the president had put in place in 2012. And if you're a Democrat, a vulnerable red state Democrat, I want to ask a little bit about the timing, because this is going to come apparently a couple months before November's midterm election. How do the politics play out in midterms? It initially didn't seem immigration would be a big issue, but does this give it the potential to be more?
I think so. I think the issue is maybe even if the constituent or the state, maybe even if they're not that worried about immigration, they might be pretty worried about this idea of executive overreach. And so if this is just one more example of Obama being a person who doesn't care about Congress, goes around Congress, especially the House, have clearly said that they don't want this. And so this idea of him just yet again doing something and it being affecting so many people, I think is going to be something that a lot of the vulnerable Democrats really don't want. The White House has said that the reason that the timing is this is because of advocates and other Democrats who say you need to do something by the end of the summer. But it's interesting, and you really wonder about, their exact reasoning to do it so close to the election in a year where the Hispanic vote, which was really galvanized, I think, in 2012 by this Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals announcement, the Hispanic vote isn't as important in most of these midterm elections. Right. So it's an interesting move, and I think one that's pretty frustrating and concerning for these vulnerable Democrats.
Certainly. If you're, in a red state, then if anything, you are likely to be criticized by association if the president or issues too many executive orders. But the politics are still interesting, too, because the flip side is that the White House says we gave Republicans so much time. It's been more than a year since the Senate passed its bill. Each time there seems to be a new excuse for why they're not getting anything done. Speaker Boehner said, I would like to get something done in 2015, but given even the politics around the border crisis, I think the White House doesn't think that Republicans would act in good faith. If you look at Marco Rubio, for example, because we're talking about that argument that DACA caused the border crisis, he was one of the proponents of that talking point, even though he was one of the gang of 8 members for the Senate immigration bill. I think it kind of speaks to long-term political implications. Does he feel like this is not going to be the issue that he needed to be engaged on for 2016?
Well, it seems that way. It seems that a lot of people are sort of going whichever the way the wind is blowing. Rubio not only was part of this Gang of Eight group that made the Senate bill, but he also had been working on legislation that would have given legal status to these young undocumented people, that are often called dreamers. So he has not only said that they should get legal status, but he's also said that this policy that makes, a lot of them not be deported is causing all of these problems. And so the argument behind how those can come together is that some sort of legal status needs to be coupled with all these enforcement things. But if you're saying that, people are coming over because they have the perception that they could get to stay, it's hard to also make the argument that we should let people stay, because how does that not perpetuate the problem? And so I think that they're sort of digging themselves into a corner here by making such a big fuss over this specific policy in particular. And in 2016, it'll be a different story.
Absolutely. I think the best summation you gave was people out going whichever way the wind blows probably sums up the immigration debate. Elise Foley from the Huffington Post. Follow her on Twitter at Elise Foley. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. We'll be back after the break. Keep watching The Bill Press Show.
This is The Bill Press Show.
This is my computer.
This is your computer. Let's go on the internet.
Let's go. Click it.
Yes.
Okay.
I cursor in between the R and the E. Racing dot. I want you to just push the period.
She's gonna love me all over again.
That's it. Jamaica, here you go.
Here we go.
Good job.
Thank you. Thank you. And I did it by myself. Feel smarter.
So, I'm kind of new here, but I've noticed a trend. My human does this funny thing where she goes around and gets all my toys, and then she hides them in that basket by the door. But it's always the same basket, and it's always in the same place. And then she acts so surprised when I find them, but, she's putting them in the same basket. Again. It's like, hello? That's where you put it last time. You were the worst at hide and go seek.
So, same time next week?
Well, of course. Put away a few bucks, feel like $1 million. For free tips to help you save, go to Feed the Pig.
All right. I know this isn't any fun to talk about, but we should. Okay. So who's going to do what?
I'll pack the dead batteries.
Great.
I'll only put what I don't need into a duffel bag.
Perfect. That's totally unhelpful.
No problem.
Meanwhile, I will try to comfort everyone by speaking in a calm voice.
And I'll try to get the generator going without any gas.
Oh, let's not forget the cell phones, which probably won't work.
Right.
And who is going to handle supplies?
I can forget to do a list for us.
Thanks, pal.
Well, I think we couldn't be any less prepared. I'm proud of you guys.
Talk to your kids about who to call,
where to meet, what to pack. Visit ready.gov/kids for tips and information.
Hey, thanks for stopping by. You know, I followed your character since the first episode. I'm a big fan. Big fan.
Thank you.
And listen, your storyline, it makes for incredible TV drama. Thing is, your drug use is very adult content. Too adult for the kids. So I'm gonna have to block you.
Oh, man.
Yeah. Well, have a good one.
You're a nice lady.
Connect with The Bill Press Show on Twitter. Follow us at BP Show and tweet using the hashtag WatchingBP. This is The Bill Press Show.
Welcome back to The Bill Press Show. I'm Sabrina Siddiqui with the Huffington Post, filling in for Bill today. And we are joined in the studio by Chris Moody, political reporter at Yahoo News, who you can follow on Twitter at Moody. Hello.
Good morning. It's great to be back on the show.
Nice to see you again. Sidekick, partner in crime.
That's right.
That was a thing once. We were going to have our own show. It seems to have fallen off.
We live the show.
By the way, earlier in the show, we had Rebecca Sinderbrand, whose Twitter handle is just Sinderbrand.
I know. How are you guys?
Now we've got Chris Moody, whose Twitter handle is
getting
just
these
Moody.
I can't disclose that, but I killed a guy. No big deal.
No big deal.
You robbed a man of his Twitter
All's
handle.
fair in love and Twitter.
That's it.
Yeah, suddenly I'm a little afraid, but Chris is causing all kinds of trouble in the course of the midterms or the lead up to the midterms. By trouble, I mean he's doing some great reporting and exposing people for trying to have it both ways, really. And one of those stories happens to be Joni Ernst, of course, who is running for Senate in Iowa up against Bruce Braley. And there's something called Agenda 21 that she staked out a position on in the primary process. Chris, can you tell us, first of all, what that is and what the story is here?
So let's set the scene. Joni Ernst is the Republican candidate. It's several months ago during the primaries. There's about half a dozen Republicans wanting to be the next senator from Iowa. They're crisscrossing the state, doing a number of forums and getting asked all kinds of questions to prove their conservative bona fides. So in 1992, the United Nations passed an initiative, a resolution called Agenda 21, dealing with agriculture. It's pretty benign, kind of a voluntary thing. Well, Glenn Beck picked it up and ended up writing a dystopian novel that said that Agenda 21 was a UN takeover to move Americans and people from all over the world off their land and steal their land. So Joni Ernst, on several occasions, discussed the worries of Agenda 21, saying that Iowans should really be worried, and she will fight Agenda 21 and make sure no Iowan loses their farm if it comes to that. Well, now we're in the general election. Now, she won the primary.
Yes.
She kicked everyone out, and she did it very well. She's actually a really appealing candidate. Anyways, now it's the general, and she has to appeal to a wider group of people in a purple state. Iowa's not red. It's not blue. It goes, either way. Mm-hmm. And so I was in Iowa last week, and I asked her, are you really worried about Agenda 21? And she said, Agenda 21 is not a threat to Iowa farmers. And it's really quite a contrast to what she was saying during the primaries. And so we wrote a story. It's by Meredith Shiner at Yahoo News here this morning.
Great reporter as well.
Discussing how the struggle of a conservative Republican candidate having to cater to the base that might be asking a lot of strange questions based upon Glenn Beck conspiracy novels and having to navigate those troubled waters and then having to explain that when those videos pop up during the general. Yeah. So now she's saying it's not a threat and not a worry, and there's several issues on that case where she, remember Mitt Romney kind of struggled with this. Remember the Etch-a-Sketch moment where they said, well, he said a lot of crazy stuff in the primaries because he had to beat Herman Cain. But now that that's over, he's normal. Trust us. It's a tough thing, and a lot of Republicans have struggled with it.
This is just a pro tip, but maybe don't take information from the dystopian writings of Glenn Beck,
but
no matter what
Sabrina,
part of the primary process you're in, because you could probably get by without having to really call it a significant threat. Maybe you could still kind of skirt the issue and say, well, I think that's something to look into, but What I really think the issue is.
But a lot of these people are fairly new to
I support farmers in Iowa. I support agriculture.
Right,
I mean,
right.
it's not that hard if you are trained appropriately.
But people are new to national politics, and this is the learning
And Joni
curve.
Ernst was an upstart candidate. She's someone, I think, just to remind people, the infamous ad castrating hogs that surfaced, that went viral, really put her on the map and got her a lot of a significant boost in fundraising, high-profile endorsements that maybe she would not have been actually the nominee, some say, had it not been for not just the ad by itself, but I think the scale that it put her on in terms of her profile and building her recognition. I mean, Sarah Palin was probably the most coveted conservative endorsement she could have wanted, I think, from the conservative primary process side.
For a certain group of
voters and the support of Marco Rubio, but also support from someone like Chris Christie, who's a moderate by all means.
Well, that's what Joni Ernst has been able to do, get the Sarah Palin endorsement and also the Chamber of Commerce. Yeah. And they haven't seen eye to eye on a lot of issues. So she's been able to run the gamut here. And I can see why she's an appealing candidate. She's in the military service, and she's well-spoken, and I think she's a very good candidate. She's going to have to deal with the stuff she said earlier.
Now, because you're Chris Moody, and as we said, always causing trouble, you've also been a thorn in the side, I will say, of the McConnell campaign, perhaps over the last week or so. A story you wrote pointing out that Mitch McConnell's wife sits on the board of a group that seems to be at odds with his coal agenda.
Well, he's running for re-election in Kentucky and really appealing to coal workers and people who benefit from the coal industry, casting his opponent, whose name's Allison Lundergan Grimes, as a friend of Barack Obama's war on coal. Yeah. Well, it just so happened that his wife, Elaine Chao, who's the former labor secretary under George W. Bush, was on the board of Bloomberg Philanthropies. She joined in 2012. In 2011, Bloomberg Philanthropies started an funding initiative of $50 million to the Sierra Club's Beyond Coal campaign with the stated goal of closing down coal plants and basically killing the coal industry. Now, the question is, she was not on the board when they made the decision to fund that. However, why did she join an organization that is playing a central funding role, the sugar daddy to the anti-coal movement? Why join that if your husband is the pro-coal senator? And no doubt about it, he is. You can look at his record. He is a friend of coal, but this is very difficult.
One of his biggest talking points throughout his campaign has been really arguing against the Obama administration's new rule, the EPA rule on coal-fired power plants, trying to come up with procedural ways to block that rule from its implementation in the Senate. Certainly even stalling an energy efficiency bill that everyone supported, wanting to, along with his colleagues, attach an amendment on that particular rule protecting the coal industry. So it's certainly ironic. What does his campaign have to say?
His campaign says that my story is inaccurate, and then when asked what, they run away. What is inaccurate? And they don't answer that question. Right. Over the weekend, they met with a lot of local reporters and said that the story was inaccurate, and they said that they were not allowed to ask the follow-up about
Usually
what
that
was
means
wrong.
that there isn't anything inaccurate when they won't actually say what it is.
And they haven't reached out to me and asked for any corrections.
And that's another big thing, is if it is in fact inaccurate, there are, as has been the case with other stories, when sometimes there is information that might not appropriately summarize a situation, campaigns reach out. They have you put up a clarification or correction if it's warranted.
Reach out is a nice way of saying they yell
call
at you with
you on
multiple
the phone
cuss
and they
words.
yell at you.
Yes, yeah. Let's peel back the curtain for our listeners here.
Yeah.
There's a lot of screaming and gnashing of teeth and bad words.
This reminds me of when during the government shutdown, I said that we had a list at the Huffington Post of Republicans who broke with leadership and the party line, saying we should bring a clean bill to fund the government to the floor. And one of them was a Congressman, Devin Nunes, who claimed to conservative outlets that he had not said that. He never said it. And his office was saying Huffington Post is inaccurate. That's not what he said. They're misrepresenting the comments.
Story.
Luckily, in that case, I had a tape because there were comments that he actually made. So then our response was to put up the tape where where he very enthusiastically told me when asked if they should bring a clean bill to the floor. He said, yeah. It wasn't even just yes. It was yeah.
What is the deal with politicians refusing to acknowledge what they have literally said and proposed? I mean, I had this problem with Rand Paul last week. Back in 2011, he proposed something to end aid to all foreign countries, including Israel. And in the proposal, it called out Israel and pointed to it by name. And when I asked him about it, he said, "I never did that."
Right.
Well, but it's
because at first
it's right here.
he was kind of like he had more of a, I think, following of his father's politics initially, and in part to help him be the successor of that coalition of supporters. They have such a strong show of support, the sort of Paulites, Paul Nation, Ron Paul Nation group of supporters. But now that he wants to really position himself as a front runner for the GOP nomination, especially in the wake of the conflict in Gaza, the absolute last thing you would want to be associated with.
But he did it. And
but he did.
If you change your mind, that's great.
And his position on foreign aid has been pretty consistent too. I mean, he in general calls for ending foreign aid to so many regions where there's conflict, where he does not believe that is in the interest of the U.S. to continue sending money until there's an improvement within, whether it's humanitarian, whether it's military. That's been like a repeated position of his. Yeah. Not an easy one to run away from. We'll be talking about, we'll hit that back after the break. Chris Moody is with us here. You keep watching The Bill Press Show. We will be back with you soon.
This is The Bill Press Show.
What gets you into college? Good SAT scores? High GPA? Lots of extracurriculars?
Sure, but what you really need is money.
If you don't have the cash, you'll need a loan.
And we mean huge student loans because the cost of college has risen 1,000% in the last 30 years.
This means big money for the banks that collect fees and interest.
Now, millions of young people are starting their adult lives with an average of $29,000 of loans on their backs.
Altogether, we're talking $1.2 trillion in student debt.
And more people are finding it impossible to pay them back. Welcome to the student debt crisis.
The increasing demand for higher education and cuts to state funding gave colleges a huge incentive to keep inflating prices.
I graduated about a year ago, currently in $35,000 of debt.
I am in debt about like $25,000.
I owe $23,000.
I owe over $50,000 in student loans.
38.8 million Americans owe money on a student loan.
And the biggest names in banking are making huge profits off the booming student loan industry. Sallie Mae, the largest provider of private student loans, made $949 million last year.
They only give you about 6 months to look for a job. You have to start paying back the loan. It's very pressuring, especially nowadays. It's very hard to find a job.
Over half of the students graduating in 2012 could not find a decent paying job.
They either had low-wage jobs or unpaid internships or were unemployed altogether.
So you can't make the payments. You start incurring late fees, which makes the loan even harder to pay off.
And it stays with you for years, even decades.
Right now, a third of the people who started repaying their loans are delinquent or in default.
That's 13.7 million people, more than the populations of Chicago, New York, and San Francisco combined.
Worse, it's not just the borrowers who are in trouble. Many loans require co-signers.
So if the student is unable to pay, that co-signer, a father, a mother, or a grandparent, is now on the hook.
Even a grandparent's Social Security benefits can be garnished to pay the loan.
We should have an answer to this. If you get really behind in your car payment or your credit cards, you can file for bankruptcy.
But Congress has made it nearly impossible to discharge student loans through bankruptcy.
Big institutions make big profits while students try to make ends meet under crushing debt.
Is this how we want our education system to work?
The whole point of going to college is to get the career you want, but lately that's been discouraged because no one can afford school. You get a job just to pay off your student loans.
We need higher education, not higher debt.
Sign up to end the student debt crisis at higherednotdebt.org.
Seen on Free Speech TV and online on TawkrTV. This is The Bill Press Show.
Welcome back to the Bill Press Show. Sabrina Siddiqui with the Huffington Post. We're entering the final stages of our show today, where I've been filling in for Bill, and Chris Moody has been with us in the studio from Yahoo News, at Moody on Twitter, but also going by Moodicris.
This is my summer moniker.
Ludicrous.
No!
I just saw this.
I'm on board.
Name appears.
I have to give all credit to Betsy Woodruff, a reporter at the Washington Examiner. So, we try to have a little fun in August. So find me on Twitter at Moody. It'll say Moodicris.
And you can find us. You
my
can
stage
find
name.
us on Twitter at BP Show. Although we may have to revisit that name now.
Yeah.
But you can also like us on Facebook, facebook.com/Bill Press Show. Hopefully you've been tuning in this morning. And before the break, we were talking about midterms. And in particular, we're talking about some of the primary process and the positions that Republicans had to stake out, in particular, Joni Ernst. But that's behind us now. Mm-hmm. They're now shifting toward the general. And there's been a lot of talk about Tea Party. Did they win? Did they lose? Certainly a lot of the incumbents were able to hold on and fend off Tea Party challengers from the right. But there was one sort of, I think from the Senate Conservatives Fund, what they had to say, having put a lot of money into challenging these incumbents, was we still influenced the debate. We forced them to take positions, in effect, that they otherwise would not have stood up for. Is that what people, was that what the consensus is?
I think a lot of people look at the election results and they say, well, that means someone won and someone lost, and that's the end of it. The Tea Party is dead or the Tea Party is alive based upon an election result. It's far more nuanced than that. I think the Senate Conservatives Fund, which is the insurgent conservative group in Republican politics right now, loathed by establishment Republicans, is right. Quite honestly, because they are getting these Republicans to talk about issues they absolutely would not have. Now, whether or not that's good for the Republican Party is something different. But it's good for the conservatives who are getting their ideas out there. And you also, on top of looking at election night results, also look at the kind of policies people in Washington now, Republicans in Congress, are supporting. It is far more conservative, I think it would be, if those insurgent groups were not enacting pressure on them.
Absolutely. And, I think the politics do continue to play out even for 2016 as we move into the next election. A lot of the lessons that were learned from 2012, what was in that RNC autopsy report, the Republican National Committee's more than 100-page take on what went wrong, none of those issues have really been thoroughly addressed, in part because Republicans in Congress feel like they could not actually act on immigration reform or reach out to minorities because of the politics around midterms, not say crazy things about women. It seems like they've continued to struggle with that insurgency, and I feel like it will still come back to hurt them unless there's some dramatic shift in 2015, which I don't see happening.
I went to a briefing at the National Republican Senatorial Committee a couple weeks ago, and they said that their main goal here in 2014, and I'll summarize basically, was saying getting non-crazies into the generals. They have been working very hard to push back on Republicans that just are not ready for prime time and get candidates in there that they think they can win and will not embarrass them so much that they will lose. The stakes in 14 are extremely high. The United States Senate is in play. This is not a pipe dream. This is an absolute thing. This is not like the House Democrats saying, we might take it back. No, you're not House Democrats. John Boehner, if he's around, will be Speaker in 2015. However, the same is not true of Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid. His leadership is in trouble. This is a fact. And Republicans know it, and Democrats damn well know it. And that's why I think you're going to see a ferocious campaign across the country for this election. It's going to be almost as fun as a presidential election.
And real quick, I did want to ask, because you mentioned Democrats, we were talking about some of the foreign crises, whether it's in Iraq, whether it's in Syria, whether it's Gaza, and a lot of what's been on the president's plate. If you're a vulnerable Democrat, how do the foreign policy politics play out for you that the world is in chaos, and elections around the corner, and even if it's not necessarily the president's fault, by association, people will blame Democrats and the administration for what's happening.
I'm not sure how much of a role foreign policy is going to play in the election. I think a lot of people are focused on how this has an impact on me personally. I think you're going to see a lot of domestic politics come into play. But you're right. It is difficult for people who are associated by party with the president of the United States, and the buck stops at his desk, and especially on foreign policy. I think you're going to see foreign policy really play a lot more into the 2016, especially if former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton runs, because she owns part of it, and she's going to have to find a way, and she's working on that, however difficult. To associate herself with that, and also keep some distance from some of the things that she might not look so good for her.
We had a fun time talking about her kerfuffle with the president, criticizing him for some of what's happening in Iraq, and the heated rhetoric that came out from some of his aides, namely David
Talk
Axelrod.
about aides yelling at you, you know.
It was like we woke up in 2008. All over again.
Right.
But I do think that what you're right. Overall, I don't think it will have much bearing on midterms, although if something really escalated in Iraq to the point where the president has to take more action than he would like to, which he has said he will not, then I think maybe it would have some kind of impact. But they've insisted there'll be no boots on the ground. They're only sending troops in an advisory role.
A new group of advisors. We heard this with Vietnam. I'm not saying it's a direct connection, but I think some people are going to remember that. And whether it's fair or not, the Republicans are going to have a very easy time. Whenever Hillary Clinton says that Obama's foreign policy is lacking, they'll just say, you were Secretary of State, that was your job.
Right.
Whether or not the nuances make it true, it's going to connect in people's minds, and the message will get out there, and I think Hillary Clinton is going to have a uphill battle on that front.
Absolutely. Chris Moody, always a pleasure having you with us. Don't forget to follow him on Twitter at Moody. We're going to take a quick break, but keep watching The Bill Press Show.
This is The Bill Press Show.
It is possible to read the history of this country as one long struggle to extend the liberties established in our Constitution to everyone in America. In other words, who, according to our laws and culture, gets to be considered a person? The law creates legal personhood, and movements create law and change culture. So, how have the courts passed laws to shape our culture? That history goes way back before Citizens United. 1819, Dartmouth College versus Woodward, Supreme Court case, turned a corporate charter from a government-granted charter to a contract. This ruling gave corporations standing within the Constitution. 1886, Santa Clara County versus Southern Pacific Railroad. Though the court did not rule on corporate personhood, the decision was subsequently cited as a precedent to hold that a private corporation is entitled to the same 14th Amendment rights of due process and equal protection as human beings. This makes it impossible for us to make laws that treat local businesses any differently than giant multinational corporations, even if their business practices are deemed to be harmful to workers, the environment and communities, or if they have a history of violating the law. Hale versus Henkel, 1906. The court granted corporations the Fourth Amendment search and seizure protection. Dodge versus Ford Motor Company, 1919. The Michigan Supreme Court says the business corporation is organized and carried on primarily for the profit of the stockholders. Stockholder primacy is established. The purpose of the corporation, according to the court, is no longer to serve the public good, as it had been. It is now to maximize profit for shareholders above all else. Pennsylvania Coal Company versus Mahon, 1922. Corporations get the Fifth Amendment takings clause, meaning if you pass a regulation that impacts a corporation's ability to make a profit, that is deemed a taking, and they can sue for the right to future profits lost. This creates a chilling effect, and local and state governments become much more hesitant to pass laws in the public interest for fear that corporations can claim loss of potential profits that cities and states will be on the hook to pay. Buckley versus Vallejo, 1976. The Supreme Court rules that spending money to influence elections is protected under the First Amendment, in effect saying that money is speech. Citizens United versus Federal Election Commission, 2010.
Today, the Supreme Court of Chief Justice John Roberts declared that because of the alchemy of its 19th century predecessors in deciding that corporations had all the rights of people Any restrictions on how these corporate beings spend their money on political advertising are unconstitutional.
The court's ruling threatens to undermine the integrity of elected institutions across the nation. It's a rejection of the common sense of the American people.
On your radio, on TV, and online. This is The Bill Press Show.
Welcome back to The Bill Press Show. Sabrina, Siddiqui with the Huffington Post filling in for Bill. It was a pleasure to be with you guys.
Good job today. We love having you in.
We made it. Well, it's been a great show. I think a lot of the Ferguson discussion in particular was really thought-provoking. So nice to hear from all the callers. Thanks to all those of you who called in. I think not to put in a shameless plug, but we're following that situation on the ground at the Huffington Post, and I'll have a piece actually going up today about training practices among law enforcement and when the use of deadly force is justified. We're going to try to stay on top of that, as well as look at the politics that inevitably will follow.
Yeah, I think that's a good thing to keep pursuing, and we'll keep talking about it on the show for sure, because, it's been, this is what, day 4 since it happened? Or
yeah.
Day 5, and it's still, there's still a lot of problems.
Still a lot of problems. Really hoping that they're able to make sure that there is no further violence and that the police is able to control the situation in a way that is peaceful and respectful of the protesters who have every right to be out on the street calling for justice and for more explanation of what happened to Michael Brown. So we'll definitely be following that. But thanks to all of you guys in the studio, too, for helping me out today.
Good job.
Yes, keep watching us and keep tweeting at us at BP Show. I'm sure I will be back soon enough.
Absolutely.
You cannot get rid of me.
Definitely.
But thank you so much. It's been a joy. Keep watching The Bill Press Show.
This is The Bill Press Show.